Chapter 1. Suspect Gu Jianjun, male, Han nationality, 33 years old, born on November 11, 1975. Suspected of organizing and leading criminal syndicate, intentional homicide, intentional wounding, intentional arson, intentional robbery, intentional trading and illegal possession of firearms, intentional explosion, rape, smuggling, indecent assault, coercion and organizing prostitution, illegal gambling, extortion, bribery, illegal detention, disrupting financial order. The above crimes have all witnesses and material evidence. After a public trial, the charges are found guilty. After deliberation by the collegial panel, I hereby pronounce the verdict. At this point, the judge looked around and saw everyone standing up. He looked down at the verdict in his hand and read, "Suspect Gu Jianjun is sentenced to death and deprived of political rights for life. This verdict is final and cannot be appealed. It will be carried out immediately. Guangdong High People's Court, April 4, 2008. Dismissed." In the solemn courtroom, the crowd immediately applauded and cheered. Someone shouted, "Get rid of evil for the people." The judges on the main bench left one by one. The defendant on the dock was wearing a prisoner's uniform and had a shaved head. 2 armed policemen pushed him out by the arm. His hands and feet were wearing heavy handcuffs and shackles, dragging on the ground. His footsteps were slow and heavy. Although he had been sentenced to death and would be carried out immediately. But he did not have the lifelessness of a prisoner before death. Instead, the corners of his mouth were raised and there was always a faint smile. When he walked to the door, the bright sunlight shone on his bald head. Gu Jianjun stopped and took a deep breath. His heart warmed and he suddenly felt a sense of rebirth. The cold handcuffs in his hands also seemed to have a trace of warmth. His gaze fell on the crowd of commoners. This is Gu Jianjun. He doesn't look like a bad guy. Why didn't he learn good things at such a young age? A white-haired old woman stared at Gu Jianjun, probably because she was old and couldn't see clearly. She wanted to see what this notorious villain who was famous throughout the province for doing all kinds of evil looked like. The rest of the crowd was also moving. The cameras in the reporters' hands were flashing non-stop. Unfortunately, the surrounding armed police would not let them get close. Gu Jianjun bowed deeply in the direction of the old woman. The white-haired old woman shouted, "Child, remember to be a good person in your next life." Gu Jianjun smiled and the armed police behind him pushed him. He staggered down the steps. The door at the back of the prison van, which had been waiting for a long time, was already open. A few armed policemen shoved him into the car and followed. The car door closed and the siren blared. Under the watchful eyes of the people, the convoy of several cars roared out of the gate of the court. The convoy headed towards the suburbs. A middle-aged armed police officer with 2 bars and 1 star on his uniform was sizing up Gu Jianjun. In modern terms, he should be a handsome young man. If it weren't for his attire, no one would be able to tell that he was a prisoner on death row who had committed all sorts of crimes. What was the reason that made such a person come to this step? Looking at the passing scenery outside the window, Gu Jianjun seemed to feel the gaze of the person opposite him. He turned around and said to the officer with a smile, "Big brother, can I have a cigarette?" The middle-aged officer had carried out such missions many times, but this person's expression and actions did not seem like someone who was about to die. He could not help but immediately become vigilant and scrutinize the criminal in front of him. The armed police soldiers on both sides also stared at him in unison, their fingers touching the triggers. Gu Jianjun shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "This isn't a Hong Kong or Taiwan police drama. Are you afraid that I'll escape? Or are you afraid that someone will come to break the prisoner van? I'm already like this, is that even possible? This is the world of the Communist Party. Not many people in China dare to do such a thing." But no matter what he said, the armed police did not say a word and closely watched his every move. "Hey, it's just a cigarette. Why are you so nervous?" Gu Jianjun glanced at the epaulettes and collars of the few people, then looked out the window and sighed, "I was also a soldier in the past. I've carried guns, made meritorious deeds, received awards, bled and sweated." After saying that, he did not say another word and looked out the window in confusion, as if he had thought of something. The officer and the soldiers were a little surprised to hear his words. The officer's vigilant expression relaxed, and the soldier's finger unconsciously moved away from the trigger. The The officer looked up and down Gu Jianjun's body, paused and finally asked, "You are also a soldier? Armed police or People's Liberation Army?" "The one at the back." Gu Jianjun turned around and smiled. The officer hesitated for a moment, then took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, lit one up and carefully handed it to Gu Jianjun. The latter thanked him, put the cigarette in his mouth and took a deep breath before exhaling. Facing the former's questioning gaze, Gu Jianjun slowly said, "I was a soldier in 1993, an infantryman. I stayed at the border for 3 years. After I retired, I returned to my hometown in the countryside. There was only my old mother and father, no siblings. But when I came back, I found out that my father passed away in the 2nd year of my service due to illness and lack of money. Even the country's prime minister came to ask for wages for the migrant workers. So there's the saying of complaining in the past. I'll let you try it." The middle-aged officer looked a little embarrassed. He took the cigarette butt from the prisoner's hand, threw it down and stepped on it. He lit another cigarette and asked curtly, "What happened next?" "My mother's illness worsened and she urgently needed money for surgery. My comrade even sold his house in order to pay for my mother's treatment. Houses were cheap at that time. They sold it for tens of thousands of dollars. If it were sold now, the price would be 10 times higher. In the end, the money from selling the house was almost spent. I was also anxious. Just then I met the boss who owed me money. In the end, I didn't get paid and I was beaten up by a group of people. Dragging a body full of injuries, I also got angry. I contacted a few of my former comrades in arms and told them about the matter. I wanted to take revenge. They were indeed brothers who had gone through fire and water with me on the border. In the end, they all came. After discussing it, we kidnapped the boss and blackmailed him for $1 million. We also threatened the boss, saying that if he dared to report it, we would kill his whole family. The boss was also timid, so he really didn't report it," Gu Jianjun said with a smile. "How could a soldier do such a knowingly illegal thing?" The officer shook his head and said, "Unfortunately, it was too late when I got the money. My mother didn't get the money and left." Gu Jianjun's voice became low. Suddenly, he looked at the officer and said agitatedly, "So what if I'm a soldier? If this was the anti-Japanese war era, I wouldn't hesitate to shed my blood for the country. Everyone says to protect the country, but I can't even protect my own parents, so what's the point of me insisting on this soldier's belief? Now go and take a look. What kind of people are enjoying themselves in those places of luxury? Are they ordinary soldiers who protect the country, or are they ordinary people? Is this the reason why you betrayed the country and harmed the interests of the country? Have you forgotten the sentence in your military oath? The interests of the country and the people are above everything else?" The officer also became agitated. The armed police soldiers in the carriage looked at the two of them in shock. This was the first time they encountered such a thing during a mission. "Harmed the interests of the country, maybe. But you said that I betrayed the country and that's too serious. Please take back your words. I, Gu Jianjun, have dared to do anything these years, but I don't dare to betray the country. Only traitors would do such a thing. I can bear any crime, but I don't dare to bear the crime of being a traitor. If I have to bear this crime before I die, I won't be able to die in peace." Gu Jianjun stared at the opposite side and sneered. The few armed police soldiers didn't understand what Gu Jianjun meant. The middle-aged officer's emotions calmed down. He stared at him thoughtfully for a while and said slowly, "Don't you regret coming to this point?" "Regret?" Gu Jianjun laughed and said, "Can one regret in life? Is there any use in regret? People who are in this line of work know that sooner or later, you will have to pay the price. It's just a matter of time. At most, you will be a good man again after 18 years. 18 years, a good man again?" The officer couldn't help but laugh and said, "Have you read too many Wuxia novels?" Not more and not less. Alright, let me introduce you to a place to read novels. Go to Qidian website when you have time. There are quite a lot of novels there." Gu Jianjun said. The middle-aged officer nodded and said with a smile, "Thank you. I'll take a look in the future." The prison van jolted. It was obvious that they had reached the outskirts and were not far from their destination. Gu Jianjun glanced at the armed police soldier sitting in the innermost corner. The soldier had been wearing a black hood and had not taken it off since the beginning. He couldn't help but ask the officer, "Later, will that brother send me on my way?" The officer nodded and didn't say anything else. Gu Jianjun shouted to the armed police soldier wearing a black hood, "Brother! Oh please. Later be steady and give me a quick death." But no one paid attention to him. Maybe it was because they were almost at their destination. Before he died, Gu Jianjun leaned his head against the wall and swayed with the van. Yesterday's prosperity was like a dream. He had beauties in his arms, but in the blink of an eye, it was like a fleeting cloud. An old song came to his mind. He couldn't help but murmur, last night stars have fallen and disappeared in the distant Milky Way. I want to remember but I've forgotten." The van slowed down and came to a sudden stop. Gu Jianjun was dragged out of the van. He looked up at the sky that had become overcast with lightning and thunder. After the police and armed police negotiated, they pushed him to the designated place of execution. The executioner was loaded with bullets. The black muzzle was aimed at the prisoner and his finger was on the trigger. Just when he was about to pull the trigger, he heard a clap of thunder in the sky. Gu Jianjun, who had already closed his eyes, suddenly opened them. A purple bolt of lightning struck from above. He only felt his body go numb and gradually lost consciousness. Before his consciousness dissipated, he asked himself in his heart, "Do I really deserve to die? Do I deserve to be struck by lightning?" The death row prisoner's charred body instantly collapsed. The police and armed police were all stunned. After the commander came back to his senses, he called the forensic doctor over to check. After a while, the forensic doctor stood up and shook his head. "He's already dead." Standing in front of the blurry corpse, the commander looked at the camera in front of him. Fortunately, he had recorded it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to explain himself. He then took the executioner's gun and pressed it against the corpse's heart. Bang! He added another shot and muttered, "You were executed according to the law, not by lightning." Chapter 2. What is licking my face? Am I not dead? Gu Jianjun didn't believe in the underworld. The first thing he thought of was that he was not dead. He struggled to open his heavy eyelids. The sun was shining brightly through the branches at the top. It was dazzling. "I'm really not dead." This was his thought when he opened his eyes. A big red tongue was swaying in front of him. He rolled his eyes. A dog's head was in front of him. It was a big yellow dog. The dog saw that he was awake and jumped up and down excitedly. Gu Jianjun was slightly stunned. Then he felt very weak. He struggled to support his body with his hands. Before he could sit up completely, his hands went soft and he fell down again. Damn. This is hunger. Gu Jianjun participated in field survival training in the army. He was very familiar with this feeling. But his body was so weak that he was not far from death. He was a little panicked. He just survived from the government and now he was starving to death. Damn. How long have I slept? Why am I so hungry? Gu Jianjun clearly knew that this situation meant that his body had reached a very dangerous state. A bowl of sugar water would be good. It could help him recover some of his strength quickly. But it was obviously impossible in the current situation. What should I do? I can't wait to die here. I need to eat something. Looking around, Gu Jianjun's head was about to explode, but he couldn't think of any way. The big yellow dog saw that he was not moving again. He panted and leaned over. "I got it. It's very nutritious. It's a good thing to recover strength." With a goal, Gu Jianjun was ready to make his move. Survival was more important than anything else. He touched the ground with his hand and held a stone in his hand. The dog seemed to be very familiar with him, but Gu Jianjun didn't know it. In his mind, he thought if you want to beat a dog, you have to hit its nose. He had experience with this. He slowly put his hand around the dog's neck. The big yellow dog was not vigilant at all. It seemed to be quite happy and wagged its tail happily. "Oh. Oh." Suddenly the big yellow dog screamed. Gu Jianjun gathered all his strength on the stone in his hand. It exploded on the dog's nose under his arm. He used up all his strength and fell down. The big yellow dog struggled for a long time after it broke free. It slowly lay on the ground and stopped breathing. It stared at the person in front of it as if it couldn't believe it. Gu Jianjun rested for a while, then crawled over with all his might. He wrapped his arms around the dog's neck and bit it. No matter how uncomfortable the dog fur was in his mouth, he didn't care. After biting the dog's neck with all his might, he sucked the fishy and salty liquid into his mouth and gulped it down. Gu Jianjun burped and sighed a breath of relief. He turned his body and used the big yellow dog's carcass as a pillow. Not long after the dog's blood reached his stomach, a wave of heat began to spread to his limbs and bones. He knew it was working. Gu Jianjun lay down and thought about what was going on. He quietly waited for his strength to recover. The scene of the execution was right in front of his eyes. It was as if he had been struck by lightning. However, he was lucky enough to not have been struck to death. But why was he here? There was no reason for the executioners to let him go just like that. The day before he was sentenced, a member of a government agency told him clearly that he was going to die this time, or else he wouldn't be able to explain himself to the international public. After thinking about it, there was a suspicious possibility. He didn't know which Dao brother had robbed the execution ground, but he had the guts and spirit. Damn it, save me till the end. What the hell are you doing by leaving me here? I almost starved to death. However, he owed them a big favor. It didn't matter. It was a good thing that he survived. He still had a few $100 million in the Swiss bank. He would repay this favor in the future. It was not good to stay here for long. He needed to find a safe place to hide first. He clenched his fists. Although he had not recovered his strength, he should have the strength to walk. He stood up shakily. Gu Jianjun thought to himself, where is this? He looked around and was stunned. In front of the forest, not far nor near, stood an ancient city wall. He could vaguely see people going in and out of the city gate. The strange thing was, there were people on horses. He couldn't help but mumble, are they shooting a movie? Did they come to Hengdian Film City? I wonder which Dao brother did it. He actually had the ability to bring me so far away. I wonder if it's safe here? With a series of doubts, the weak Gu Jianjun slowly walked out of the forest. He didn't go far and was resting against a tree when he heard a rustling sound behind him. He looked back and saw an old woodsman walking out of the forest with firewood. Gu Jianjun laughed involuntarily. He thought to himself that this disguise was quite realistic. They were indeed shooting a movie. The old woodsman didn't pay attention to the person in front of him. He carried the firewood and walked past Gu Jianjun. When he walked past Gu Jianjun, he suddenly stopped. The courage on his shoulders slid to the ground as he turned to look at Gu Jianjun in surprise. Oh no. This old man seems to know me. Could there be a national arrest warrant? Gu Jianjun was shocked. He thought to himself, I have to silence him. Otherwise, it will be difficult for me to escape with my current strength. The old woodsman shouted at Gu Jianjun in surprise, Young Master Yu, why are you here? Where have you been all this time? Old Master Yu has sent people to look for you. Hehe. Pretending to recognize the wrong person. This old man really has bad intentions. He actually dares to play this game with me. He thinks I'm a rookie. Then don't blame me for being rude. Gu Jianjun sneered as he looked at the woodsman walking over. He slowly clenched his fists. The old woodsman said passionately, Young Master Yu, come back with me. Old Master Yu is dying of anxiety. This old man's acting is quite good. As expected of an actor. He even dares to call me Young Master Yu. Seeing him approach, Gu Jianjun's killing intent rose. Suddenly his mind boomed. The words Young Master Yu circled in his mind as he fainted. While he was unconscious, the events of Young Master Yu kept replaying in his mind like a movie. When Gu Jianjun opened his eyes again, he was lying on a soft bed. In front of him, there was a girl with a servant's braid looking at him. This girl was very familiar, so familiar that Gu Jianjun could call out her name immediately. When the lady saw Gu Jianjun awake, she shouted in surprise, Master. Madam. Young Master is awake. She shouted as she ran out. F***K. This voice was very familiar. Gu Jianjun was on the verge of tears. He was not an idiot. Combining the causes and effects as well as the additional memories in his mind, he recalled a very ridiculous matter. He had read about this matter countless times in online novels. Gu Jianjun was really dead. He had transmigrated. If he was not mistaken, his name was now Yu Qianqiu. This should be the residence of the richest merchant in Swallow City, Yu Changge. Before the person arrived, a lady's voice came from outside the door. A series of hurried footsteps could be heard. This is my mother's voice. Gu Jianjun knew who it was the moment he heard the voice. The image of a benevolent woman appeared in his mind, matching perfectly with the lady who had walked to the bed. A plump middle-aged man beside the woman was looking at him with concern. This is my old man. The last bit of doubt in Gu Jianjun's mind disappeared. He was completely speechless. His gaze swept past the crowd surrounding the bed in a daze. It landed on a young man. If Gu Jianjun was not mistaken, this person was his cousin. Recalling the scene in his mind, Gu Jianjun's eyes narrowed and a cold glint flashed across them. Chapter 3. His cousin's name was Shui Gaibao, the only son of Yu Qianchou's brother's mother. The Shui family was a wealthy family, and Yu Changge got rich by marrying the daughter of the Shui family. A few years ago, because the Shui family offended the government, they were destroyed. Their only son Shui Gaibao sought refuge with his aunt Shui Ernyang, who was Yu Qianchou's mother. Regarding the arrival of this nephew, firstly, it was a close relative, and secondly, it was a form of gratitude to the family. Thus he treated Shui Gaibao as his own son. Half a month ago, Shui Gaibao invited his cousin Yu Qianchou for an outing, but they ran into kidnappers. The former escaped and the latter was tied up. After Yu Qianchou was caught by the kidnappers and brought to the village, he found out from a small leader that the kidnappers and his cousin had conspired to kidnap him. Yu Qianchou, who was locked up in the village's horse pen, didn't believe it at first. It wasn't until he accidentally saw his cousin coming to the village that he believed it. He was lucky. On the day his cousin came to the village, a big yellow dog he raised followed his scent and found him. After biting off the rope that tied him up, the man and the dog ran away in the wild. Luckily, the big yellow dog knew the way, and after running for 3 days, they finally arrived at the outskirts of Swallow City. When they were almost home, the hungry young master Yu couldn't take it anymore and fainted on the ground. After Gu Jianjun died, for some unknown reason he possessed the body of the fainted Yu Qianchou. When he woke up, he didn't recognize that dog. In the end, he killed it to save his life. It could be said that the big yellow dog saved his master's life twice. It was just that he was a little unwilling to die. Before he fainted, the young master couldn't understand why his cousin wanted to harm him. He couldn't understand, but it didn't mean that Gu Jianjun couldn't. The Yu family was the only son, and now that his only son was dead, the family's wealth naturally belonged to his nephew. Shui Baogai's face turned gloomy, but he hid it well and smiled kindly at Gu Jianjun. Wrong. He should be called Yu Qianchou now. Son of AB*, it seems like you won't give up on killing me. If I'm killed by you again, I'll have wasted all these years of being a big brother. Yu Qianchou thought to himself. You ungrateful thing, see how I'll deal with you. The doctor came, took her pulse and told her that her body was still a little weak, but it was not a big problem. She would be fine after a few days of rest. After a while, only the serving maid was left in the room. Yu Qianchou didn't say a word. His mind was still in a mess. His thoughts were constantly going back and forth and he needed to sort them out. After some time, Yu Qianchou finally understood the ancient costumes in front of him. The difference in status was too great. There was no hope for him. Sooner or later she would fall into someone else's hands. How could he let this happen? Zhao Wuchou, who was lying on the bed with a dead look, was extremely anxious. He sat up abruptly. The maid Qingchao was shocked. She hurried over to support him and asked, "Young master, what do you want to do?" She didn't know that her young master had already made up his mind to cultivate for the rest of his life. Sigh. Yu Qianchou let out a long sigh and lay down. His heart was cold. Where can I go to cultivate as an immortal? I have no clue at all. When I really become an immortal, the good cabbages will be taken by pigs. Do you expect people to wait for you to compete for the cabbages placed in a pig's nest? Let's see who can take it first. Just as he was in despair, Shui Gaibao came in with a small bowl. Qingchao hurriedly took it. When Yu Qianchou saw it was this guy, he instantly became alert. Shui Gaibao sat on the side of the bed and grabbed his hand. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. Cousin, it's all my fault. If I didn't invite you out to play that day, you wouldn't have met with the kidnappers and suffered. Luckily you came back safely. If not, I would feel guilty for the rest of my life. I wouldn't have the face to see uncle and aunt. Damn it, bastard. You're crying like a cat, crying like a mouse. You're playing this game with me. Do you really think I'm that idiot, Yu Qianchou? After cursing in his heart, Yu Qianchou squeezed out a smile. You can't blame me. Cousin, don't take it to heart. Let bygones be bygones. Just take it as my bad luck. Although he said this, he thought in his heart. You're unlucky to meet me. When I recover, I'll kill you immediately. Keeping you by my side is more like I'm tired of living. If cousin can think like this, I won't say anything." As he said this, he wiped away the 2 drops of tears at the corner of his eyes. He took the small bowl in Xianxia's hand and said, "This is chicken soup that I personally cooked. Take it as an apology to calm cousin's shock. Come, Xianxia, help cousin up. I'll feed him personally." Just as Xianxia agreed, Yu Qianzhou hurriedly stopped her. He said with a serious expression, "Cousin, I already said that let bygones be bygones. What do you mean by this? A gentleman stays away from the kitchen. You want cousin to personally cook for me. Do you want me to feel uneasy for the rest of my life? How can I drink this chicken soup?" This is. Just as Shui Gaibao was about to explain, Yu Qianzhou hurriedly said, "Cousin, don't say any more. I will never drink this chicken soup. Qianzhou, send cousin out." After saying this, he turned his back to the 2 and pretended to be angry. Shui Gaibao was stunned. He didn't expect that his cousin, who was always obedient to him, would be so tough today. He felt nervous. Could it be that what he did had been discovered? After thinking about it, he felt that it was impossible. He did it flawlessly. It should be impossible for him to be discovered. His expression softened a little. He said embarrassedly, "Since that's the case, cousin will go out first. Cousin, rest well." After he went out, Yu Qianzhou turned around and looked at the small bowl on the table. He thought to himself, "If I dare to eat the food you sent, wouldn't that be seeking death? Who knows if you poisoned it? No, I have to get rid of him as soon as possible. It's not easy to live in fear." Chapter 4. Yu Qianzhou felt that his body should be able to recover after a day's rest. Who knew that this body was so much worse than it was in his previous life? Although he was still a young man, his physique was rather poor and it took him almost 3 days to recover. But that wasn't the most depressing thing. The most depressing thing was that he thought of something that made his heart ache. He had transmigrated here and the hundreds of millions in his Swiss bank account in his previous life had gone down the drain. According to his calculations, his wealth in his previous life was more than 10 times that of the Yu family. The more he thought about it, the more his heart ached and he couldn't eat or drink for a few days. In the end, he had no choice. Even if he hadn't transmigrated here, he would still have been executed. The most tragic thing in life was when a child wanted to be raised, but his parents weren't around. Guo Jianjun's parents died young and he couldn't fulfill his filial duties. Now it had become Yu Qianzhou. Many times a day his parents showed great concern for him. Soon his heart, which was hurt from losing a large sum of money, was healed. Facing the 2 elders, he treated them as his own parents from the bottom of his heart. Yu Qianzhou, who was strolling in the Yu family's garden, thought about many things. The education he had received in his previous life made him feel an invisible pressure when facing the country and its people. No matter how outrageous some things were, there was still a bottom line that he didn't dare to cross. But it was different now. There was no relationship between here and there. Bosque, no, it should be young Master Yu had made up his mind to do whatever he wanted here. Right now all he could think of was how he could get rid of Shui Gaibao. He couldn't think of a proper solution even though he had a headache thinking about it. His biggest concern was his parents, especially his mother, who treasured the only child of the Shui family. Flowers were in full bloom in the garden. Yu Qianzhou thought about it a few times, but he still couldn't come up with a good idea. Looking at a golden chrysanthemum, young Master Yu stared at it for a long time, until he let out a deep breath and reached out to pluck the chrysanthemum. He put it under his nose and sniffed the fragrance. He narrowed his eyes and murmured, "Indecisiveness leads to chaos. Damn it. For the past few days, I've been living in fear even when I'm eating and drinking. If this goes on, even if I don't get killed by him, I'll scare myself to death. I'm about to have a nervous breakdown. Wasn't he the only son of the Shui family? I'm the only son of the Yu family. Why should I have to suffer like this? You can do it, but I can't." After Yu Qianzhou left, the garden was quiet. On the clean stone path, there was only a crushed chrysanthemum. Shui Gaibao was quite happy. His cousin had been lukewarm to him for the past few days, but today he actually asked him to drink wine and admire the moon in the backyard. She had always thought that she had been exposed by Yu Qianzhou previously, causing her to feel uneasy. It seemed like she had been worrying too much. After the defeat of the Shui family, he sought refuge with his aunt. As a member of the Yu clan, they had never treated him unfairly. But the days of living under someone else's roof made him, who was used to being a young master, feel uncomfortable, as if needles were pricking his back. His aunt had given him quite a bit of pocket money, but compared to the extravagant spending at home, it was still a little hard to make ends meet. With young Master Yu suppressing him, it was not up to him, young Master Shui, to point fingers here. Over time, hatred was buried in his heart. Once, drinking alone in a restaurant, he grumbled after getting drunk. "Yu Chang'e, if not for my Shui clan, you wouldn't be where you are today. But you only give me 100 taels of silver every month, how ungrateful." His words fell into the ears of a person at the next table. This person was a bandit leader of the Octagon village. After knowing that Shui Gaibao was the nephew of the richest man in Swallow City, Yu Chang'e, he wanted to befriend him. In the end, the two hit it off. After that, they decided to kidnap Yu Qianqiu and blackmail Yu Chang'e, intending to kill him after getting the money. This way, the Octagon village could get the money, and Shui Gaibao could inherit the Yu clan's assets. However, to their surprise, even though they had kidnapped Yu Qianqiu, he managed to escape. After that, they saw Yu Qianqiu being sent home. Afraid that the matter would be exposed, Shui Gaibao wanted to kill him again. But his uncle Yu Chang'e had sent people to guard him day and night, so he never had a chance to make a move. He was originally quite worried, but today his cousin came to invite him to drink and admire the moon with a smile. His heart was finally at ease. His cousin obviously did not know that the matter was related to him. It was good that he did not know. He would find a chance next time. After the servant girl helped him tidy up his clothes, Shui Gaibao happily went to the banquet. On the stone table in the garden, food and wine were prepared. Yu Qianqiu guarded a lantern, waiting alone. The candlelight flickered, shining on his face. His fingers were lightly tapping on the stone table when the sound of footsteps could be heard. Yu Qianqiu's cold eyes swept towards the entrance of the garden, his face changing into an eager smile. "Cousin, you made me wait for a long time." Yu Qianqiu stood up with a smile. Shui Gaibao walked over and pointed at himself, saying, "My clothes are not neat, how can I come to cousin's date? We are a family, there is no need to care so much. Cousin, sit." Yu Qianqiu invited him to sit, picking up the wine jug to pour wine for him. As he raised his hand, he accidentally touched the lantern on the table. The lantern fell to the ground, the flame extinguishing, and it was instantly dark. Yu Qianqiu said, "Look at how clumsy I am." "Cousin, don't rush, just light it up again, I will pick it up." Shui Gaibao finished laughing and bent down to pick it up. Just as he stood up, he saw a black shadow smash towards him. Shui Gaibao grunted and fell down. Under the moonlight, Yu Qianqiu held a rod, going around the stone table, holding the rod with both hands, smashing the head of the person on the ground. After a while, he finally stopped moving and kicked the floor, saying, "Damn it! I can't be bothered to talk to you, I'm afraid you won't die." The candlelight was lit up again, and young Master Yu took the lantern and shone it at the mangled corpse on the ground, then poked it with the rod. Seeing that it was dead, he nodded. Putting the lantern back on the table, he poured a cup of wine and drank it in one gulp, smacking his lips, saying, "Finally rid of this scourge, I can sleep in peace. Nice. Old Master will have to worry about the rest. I don't believe he will send me, his only son, to the authorities." With that said, he picked up the rod and walked away, muttering. One could faintly hear him saying, "Fuck. I can't even find a suitable weapon in such a huge residence, forcing me to find such a thick rod from the firewood pile." Young Master Yu carried the rod to the kitchen, threw it into the stove and left. He went around to the entrance, found a corner and squatted down. After squatting for a while, Yu Qianqiu felt that something was missing, touched his chest and was stunned. He sighed, "I have to quit even if I don't want to, damn it. Where am I going to find cigarettes to smoke?" The door opened and Yu Chang'e, who had just finished socializing, returned with 2 attendants. He had just taken a few steps when he suddenly heard someone shout, "Father!" It was his son's voice. Yu Chang'e was stunned and he turned to see Yu Qianqiu squatting in the shadow of the corner. He couldn't help but frown, saying, "Cho, why are you squatting here? You just recovered, be careful not to catch a cold." "Father, I have something to tell you." Yu Qianqiu walked over slowly. Yu Chang'e knew that his son had been waiting here for him, and this was the first time he had seen him like this. He said to the attendants behind him, "Go back and rest." The two of them respectfully retreated. "What's the matter?" Yu Changwei asked in a loving tone. Yu Qianqiu said, "Father, follow me." The former did not ask any more questions and followed his son to the garden. Yu Qianqiu picked up the lantern on the stone table and it illuminated the corpse on the ground. Yu Changwei looked in the direction of the candlelight, and the person lying on the ground was badly mutilated, and his head was smashed into a pulp. He could no longer tell who it was. However, he could still tell from the clothes of the people in the Yu residence, and he could vaguely guess who the corpse on the ground was. He frowned slightly and said, "It's your cousin?" Yu Qianqiu nodded and observed his father's expression. Seeing that his father did not have much of a reaction, he thought to himself, "I was right. For a business to be this big, how could it be simple?" Yu Changwei sat down on the stone bench, stared at his son and asked, "Why did you do this? Did he have anything to do with your previous kidnapping?" His son did not directly answer him and only filled up the wine cup in front of his father, saying, "The wine and dishes are clean, no one touched them." After saying that, he filled up his own cup, sat down, and after drinking a cup he slowly told his father what had happened. The more Yu Qianqiu spoke, the darker Yu Changwei's face became. When the former finished, the latter slammed the table and said angrily, "As expected, it's this unruly bastard. He actually wants to end our Yu family's line. I have long suspected that it was him. If it wasn't for your mother, I would have made him beg for death. Father, I killed him with my own hands. I'm afraid that if my mother finds out..." Before Yu Qianqiu could finish, Yu Changwei waved his hand and said, "You don't know anything, go back and rest. I'll handle this." "Got it, father. Then I'll go wash up and sleep?" Yu Qianqiu asked, and his father nodded. Seeing his son leave indifferently, Yu Changwei was slightly surprised. He did not expect his son to kill someone with his own hands, and even more so, he did not expect his son to be so calm. He knew how much mental fortitude was required to do this. It seemed like he had been stimulated by this kidnapping, but now it seemed like it was not a bad thing. At least it was better than being a muddle-headed young master. After drinking a cup of wine, he sighed, "My Yu family finally has a successor. I haven't been a big brother for many years. I don't like the cold bedside. Don't force me to miss. Don't force me to cry, I'll fall out." After getting rid of the worry in his heart, Yu Qianqiu lay on the bed, crossed his legs and hummed a song and slowly fell asleep. Chapter 5. He slept until the sun was high up in the sky. When he got up, he sat on the edge of the bed in a daze. It was unbelievable that he had changed from Gujianjun to Yu Qianqiu. He murmured, "Yu Qianqiu, this name has a good meaning. It means there are no worries, right? I wonder what he looks like in person." Thinking of this, he called for his maid, Qingqiao, to help him wash up and change his clothes. After that, he sat in front of the bronze mirror. The bronze mirror was not as clear as the mirror in his previous life. Yu Qianqiu was a little listless. No matter how unclear he was, he could roughly see his appearance. Compared to the handsome Bosqua in his previous life, his current appearance was simply too ordinary. The only good thing about him was that he was younger than in his previous life. He was only 16 years old this year. He comforted himself by thinking that it was probably the mirror's problem. He ordered Qingqiao to prepare a basin of ink. His ordinary face was reflected in the basin. Yu Qianqiu completely gave up. Last night he was still dreaming of an immortal sister, a handsome man and a beautiful woman. Now he could only dream. Someone reported to the authorities that the bodies of a man and a woman were found outside the city. After an investigation by the authorities, they confirmed that the dead were Shui Gaibao and his personal maid from the Yu residence. They had probably encountered bandits and were killed. After the Yu residents received the news, they sent people to confirm the identities of the dead. When she learned that Shui Gaibao was dead, Shui Ernyang cried her heart out. However, the authorities could not find out who the murderer was. When Yu Qianqiu found out, he could not help but admire his father's ruthlessness. He did not expect that Yu Changwei was afraid that the news would leak, so he killed the maid as well. A few days later, a funeral was held in the Yu residence. There were a lot of monks and Daoists, and it was noisy for a few days. The father and son also pretended to be sad. They did not need to be taught to do this, and they pretended to be good at it. Xue Ernyang had been crying for the past few days, nagging about how the Xue family was going to die out without descendants. Later on, she didn't know who came up with the idea, but she pulled Yu Qianzhou and begged him to have a few more sons so that one of them could inherit the Xue family's bloodline. This made Yu Changgui's face turn green and his teeth hurt. Yu Qianzhou stammered as he dealt with it. Several days later, after Xue Gaibao's burial, Xue Ernyang's grief subsided. She sent someone to summon her son. When Yu Qianzhou heard his mother call him, his scalp went numb. These few days he had been scared by his mother's crying. He even regretted killing Xue Gaibao back then. His father was smart and found an excuse to hide outside. Seeing that his mother had stopped crying, Yu Qianzhou heaved a sigh of relief and sat down obediently. Mistress Xue held a sparkling and translucent jade pendant in her hand and stared at it in a daze. Not long after, her eyes turned red again and tears welled up in them. "Mother, why did you call me here?" Afraid that she would cry again, Yu Qianzhou quickly changed the topic. "Mother, why did you call me here?" Afraid that she would cry again, Yu Qianzhou quickly changed the topic. Xue Ernyang nodded and told him the reason why she called her son over. It turned out that the Xue family was established in the generation of Xue Ernyang's great-grandfather. It was said that the ancestor of the Xue family once saved an immortal, and that immortal helped the Xue family to build a business and left a jade pendant. Before he left, he told the Xue family that he could help the Xue family again in the future, and if they had any requests, they could break the jade pendant and he would come. At that time, the ancestor of the Xue family was still young, unmarried, and honest. He never intended to ask for help from an immortal again, so he passed down the jade pendant as a family heirloom. When it came to the generation of Xue Ernyang's father, he didn't dare to tell his eldest son about the jade pendant. Before he died, he gave the jade pendant to his daughter, and told her that if there was a good man among her brother's children, the jade pendant could be passed on to him. If there wasn't, he would rather let the jade pendant become an ordinary item than disturb the immortal. Now that the only descendant of the Xue family had died, there was no way to pass the jade pendant on. What Xue Ernyang meant was that she wanted to use the jade pendant to make a deal with her son. As long as her son promised to adopt one of his children to inherit the Xue family's bloodline, she was willing to leave the jade pendant in her hand to her son, and not pass it on to the Xue family. After listening to his mother's words, Yu Qianzhou's eyes immediately emitted a green light. He stared at the jade pendant in his mother's hand and swallowed with difficulty. Ever since he found out that there were immortals in this world, he had been obsessed with them. He had never expected that this matter, which he had been unable to find a way out, would be in the hands of his mother. However, when his mother brought up the matter of adopting a son, her father strongly opposed it. In this world, the responsibility of having children was as great as the heavens. The Yu family didn't have a lot of people to begin with, and for 3 consecutive generations they only had one son. When Yu Qianzhou went missing, Yu Changgui was so anxious that his mouth grew a circle of blisters. If his son really had a promising future and could have 1 or 2 more children, he would be overjoyed. How could he bear to let someone else adopt a son? At that time he had flatly rejected the idea. "Can I make the decision on this matter?" Thinking of this, Yu Qianzhou embarrassedly said, "Mother, why don't you ask father? I'm afraid I can't make the decision on this matter." "This child, you can talk things through with your father. What else do I need to say to you? I'm telling you all this because I want you to beg your father. Your father has always been obedient to you, so it's better for you to beg him." Xue Ernyang said angrily. "Heh. She even used a roundabout way to save the country." Yu Qianzhou laughed in his heart and said, "Mother, why don't you let father know about the jade pendant? Maybe father will agree." Xue Ernyang clenched her teeth and said, "Why didn't I tell him? He didn't agree that day. That night I told him about the jade pendant. That dead man is stubborn, he just won't agree." Hehe. Yu Qianzhou scratched his head and laughed awkwardly. "If father doesn't agree, then there's nothing I can do." Who knew that as soon as he finished speaking, Xue Ernyang's tears would immediately fall. Faster, it's happening again. Yu Qianzhou's scalp went numb. He quickly begged for mercy. "Mother, don't cry. I'll go and beg father, okay?" "Really?" Xue Ernyang asked while wiping her tears. Yu Qianzhou didn't dare to say anything else. He nodded his head vigorously and agreed. 2 days later in the backyard, the father and son sat in front of a stone table. Father, immortals. You won't agree to such a good thing? Isn't it just adopting a son? When the time comes, our son will have 7 or 8 children and you can choose as you please. Yu Qianqiu said anxiously. Bastard. How can the Yu clan's descendant be adopted by someone else? If word of this gets out, where do you want me to put my old face? After I die, how will I face my ancestors? Yu Changui was furious. This old fellow was so stubborn that his mouth was about to break from all the friction. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. He made it clear, I want the jade pendant in mother's hands. Full. Yu Changui scolded. He stood up and pointed at his son, scolding, If you don't agree now, are you afraid that the jade pendant will run away? After we are husband and wife, everything in the Yu clan will be yours. Do you still need to use your own son to exchange for it? Full. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He finally knew what his father was planning. He thought to himself, ruthless. This old fellow wants to eat everything. He doesn't even want to take a single cent out. He's too black-hearted. After standing up, he said in a deep voice, Father, I want to cultivate. Yu Changui was startled. He immediately shook his head and said, No. Although cultivating is good, I've never heard of an immortal being able to carry on the family line. My Yu clan only has one son. If you leave, who will carry on the family line for my Yu clan? So this was what the old fellow was worried about. It seemed that in the online novels he read in his previous life, immortals were able to have children. Yu Qianqiu's thoughts turned and he had an idea. Thus, he made up a story about a chance encounter with an immortal. From their mouths, he found out that not only could immortals carry on the family line, but they also had the story of a cultivation clan that had been passed down for thousands of years. In short, Yu Changui was dumbfounded. Finally, Yu Qianqiu asked, Father, don't you want my Yu clan to become an immortal cultivation clan that will exist forever? Yu Changui didn't think that his son would lie to him. To be able to describe the matters of immortal cultivation so vividly, it couldn't be a lie. How could an ordinary person know about this? He couldn't help but ask in surprise, Is my son telling the truth? You really didn't lie to me? Yu Qianqiu knew that his father was moved. He added fuel to the fire and made a promise. Yu Changui immediately agreed. The two of them immediately went to find Shui Ernyang. I'm rich. I'm rich. Holding the sparkling and translucent jade pendant in both hands, Yu Qianqiu was extremely excited. He finally got his hands on it. He wanted to smash the jade pendant on the spot. He couldn't wait to leave with the immortal. Damn it, that's an immortal. It doesn't matter if I lose a few 100 million in UBS. Even if it's a few 100 million, I won't even look at it. If it wasn't for Yu Changui pulling him to take a bath and burn incense to pay respect to the immortal, he would have really done it. At first, when Shui Ernyang heard that her son was going to leave with the immortal, she didn't want to inherit the Shui clan's bloodline anymore. She refused to hand over the jade pendant no matter what. But how could she resist this father and son who had the same opinion? One old and one young, one coaxed and deceived. After a lot of effort, they finally got the jade pendant. In the back garden, an incense table was set up. After taking a bath, Yu Qianqiu knelt there, excited and nervous. He held the jade pendant and trembled non-stop. At the last moment, he was worried about personal gains and losses. One moment he was thinking about whether the jade pendant was really useful. The next moment he was thinking about whether the immortal would take him away when he came. All kinds of strange thoughts came to his mind. Knowing that her son was going to leave, Shui Ernyang leaned on her husband's arms and wiped away her tears. Yu Qianqiu, who was kneeling there, turned his head to look at the two of them and said, My son is going to fall. In fact, he had said the same thing 3 times. Every time he just said it but didn't do it. It could be seen that this guy was indeed a little nervous. When he said the same thing for the 7th time, Yu Changui was angry. He walked over and grabbed the jade pendant in his hand. Pa! The jade pendant shattered on the ground. Suddenly, the whole back garden became strangely quiet. Shui Ernyang also stopped crying and looked around with her eyes wide open. Chapter 6. There was a gentle breeze in the garden and the flowers swayed. The family of 3 waited anxiously for a long time. In the end, they realized that nothing unexpected had happened. The legendary immortal did not appear either. Both father and son looked at Shui Ernyang suspiciously. The latter blushed and said uneasily, I'm not talking nonsense. These are really words that have been passed down from my ancestors for generations. You're Shui Dainiu's descendant? The three of them were looking at the broken jade on the ground when a strange and old voice came from behind them. The three of them were shocked and turned to look. A white-robed old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion was smiling at the family of three. He had a benevolent face and held a horsetail whisk in his hand. Ah! The three of them were stunned. Xianxia reacted the quickest. He thought, such an awesome look just like the ones on TV. It would be strange if he's not an immortal. He knelt down first. With their son taking the lead, the husband and wife also knelt down without a word. Shui Ernyang replied, Shui Ernyang is my great-grandfather. Since you're the descendant of an old friend, there's no need to be so polite. Get up, the old man said with a smile. After the three of them stood up, the old man asked again, May I know why you called me here? The family of three looked at each other not knowing what to say. Xianxia clenched his teeth and knelt down. I want to ask old Immortal to take me as your disciple and bring me to cultivate. Get up and talk. The old man raised his hand and said. Xianxia thought, damn it. You haven't agreed yet. Can I get up now? It seems that people in the past had to kneel until the other party agreed to take them as their master. The old man looked at him meaningfully. Xianxia's heart skipped a beat. He thought, it can't be. Could it be that he can tell what I'm thinking? The celestial paced around and sighed. Shui Dainiu has done me a favor. When I left back then, I divined that his descendants would have no descendants, so I left this psychic jade pendant behind. I wanted to help Shui family resolve this disaster to repay his kindness. Now it seems, sigh. He shook his head and looked at Xianxia before continuing. Young man, I'm not belittling you, but your physique is extremely poor. Immortal cultivation is not suitable for you at all. Even if I bring you back to the mountain, you won't have any future to speak of. You have to think carefully. Why don't you change your request? When Yu Changge and his wife heard the old immortal's words, they deeply agreed and looked at their son worriedly. Holy shit. The old man spouted so much nonsense. In the end, he just wanted to go back on his word. Change the request? What haven't I played before? Do you think there's anything else in this broken place that can attract me other than immortals? Where else could he find such a good opportunity after losing it? Damn it. I don't want to trade. Let's see who is thick-skinned. This was what Xianxia thought to himself. He didn't say anything. He purposely looked at the broken jade on the ground and kowtowed without moving. From Xianxia's actions, it was clear that he did not want to exchange. Seeing their son like this, the couple was really afraid that the old immortal would lose face, but they didn't know if they should say anything. The old immortal frowned and secretly thought that this kid really didn't know what was good for him. He said unhappily, Since you are not willing to exchange, I will keep my promise. However, I can't accept you as my disciple because my identity doesn't allow it. However, I can choose another good teacher for you. Are you willing? Forget it. I can't force this old man into a corner. If I annoy him, he will just leave. Xianxia hurriedly kowtowed and said, Yes, yes. Then let's go. The old immortal waved his big sleeves. Xianxia, who had just stood up to say goodbye to his parents, suddenly couldn't move at all. His vision turned black and he couldn't see anything. He could only hear the whooshing sound beside his ears. He couldn't help but curse the old immortal's 18 generations of ancestors in his heart. The couple in the garden saw the two people suddenly disappear in front of them. After a moment of shock, they also knew that their son had been taken away by the old immortal. On Guangzhong on Qingguang Mountain. There are traces of immortals in the depths of the clouds. The human world is blessed with boundless happiness. I am willing to live in this mountain for the rest of my life. Qingguang Mountain was about 3,000 feet high. It covered an area of several thousand miles. The mountain was steep and the forest was dense at the foot of the mountain. Wild beasts roamed everywhere. It was a place that was rarely visited by humans. What the world didn't know was that there was another scenery at the top of the mountain. Ong Guangtsung, who had extraordinary strength in the cultivation world, was at the top of the mountain. A ray of light streaked across and landed in front of Ong Guangtsung's mountain gate. Xianxia's whole body relaxed. His eyes lit up. He could finally see after holding it in for a long time. After asking around, he had already reached the top of the mountain. Halfway up the mountain, there was a sea of clouds and fog. The whole mountain top was shrouded in a layer of hazy green light. Yu Qianzhou thought, what a paradise on earth. It really is like the place where the immortals live. Follow me. The old immortal beside him lightly shouted. Young master Yu hurriedly followed. When the two boys guarding the mountain gate saw the old immortal, they bowed together and said, Greetings, sect master. The old immortal nodded. Yu Qianzhou got a fright. His little heart thumped and he thought, my God, it's the sect master. Incredible. So this old guy is also a gang leader. He was in the same line as me in my previous life. We're both bosses. He hurriedly followed. Along the way many people bowed to the old immortal. Yu Qianzhou then came to a big hall. The big hall was made of wood and stone. It was spacious and majestic. The kid muttered in his heart, if this place was developed as a tourist attraction in my previous life, with the unique natural environment and scenery, I would definitely make a fortune. The mountain is too high. The first thing to do is to build a cable car at the top of the mountain. After Yu Qianzhou followed the old immortal into the big hall, many old men stood up from the praying mats and bowed. Sect Master Xianxia. The old man smiled to the two sides and walked straight to the praying mat in the center and sat down. Yu Qianzhou obediently stood by his side. The others also sat down, but they all stared at Yu Qianzhou and sized him up. The old immortal smiled and explained, 800 years ago, I owed someone a favor of saving my life in Swallow City. Today his descendant begged me to join Ong Kwang-tsung to cultivate. In order to repay this favor I can only bring this young man up the mountain. To be honest, his physique is extremely poor. He's not suitable for cultivation at all. I wonder which junior brother is willing to give me face and accept him. Just treat him as an errand boy. Faster, thief. Old fart, you're talking about me like this. So many people aren't giving me any face at all. You actually want me to do errand boy? Just you wait. One day I'll tear apart your bullsh asterisk Tiang Kwang. Yu Qianzhou kept cursing in his heart, but he didn't dare to show it on his face. He knew that he had to lower his head when he was under someone else's eaves. However, looking at the group of old men in the big hall, it seemed that not many of them liked him. No one was willing to accept him as a disciple. After holding it in for a long time, a sloppy old man sitting at the very back stood up and said, Then follow me. I don't have a disciple anyway. The sect master, whose face had gradually darkened, smiled and said, It's been hard on junior brother. Quickly go and acknowledge him as your master. The last sentence was said to Yu Qianzhou, who was beside him. Yu Qianzhou hurriedly ran over and kowtowed 3 times to the sloppy old man. Disciple Yu Qianzhou pays respect to master. The old man smiled. After calling him up, he said to the Sect Master Xixiang. Then I'll bring him back first. The Sect Master nodded. The group of people congratulated him for taking in a good disciple. The old man smiled and shook his head. He led Yu Qianzhou away. The latter cursed in his heart, a bunch of bastards who will die a horrible death. Chapter 7. Yu Qianzhou, right? The master who was walking in front asked indifferently. The disciple behind quickly replied, Yes, master. His voice was very respectful and even a little flattering. His foundation is terrible, only this name is a little interesting. The master nodded and asked, Why do you want to cultivate? The disciple immediately replied, To subdue demons, to uphold justice. The master stopped, turned around and interrupted him, Don't talk to me about these useless things. Answer me honestly. If I tell you the truth and you don't chase me away, I'll tell you, to pick up girls. Do you understand? The disciple thought this in his heart, but he smiled awkwardly and said, Master's eyes are really sharp, I can't hide my thoughts from you. To pick up girls, to be immortal. The master turned around and the disciple followed. The two of them asked and answered and gradually walked away. From the master's words, Yu Qianzhou more or less understood Ong Kwang-tsung. The master's name was Hao Sanxi, an 8th generation disciple, and was of the same generation as sect master Lu Chongqing. As for those with higher seniority, they didn't care about worldly affairs and hid in the back mountain to cultivate. Speaking of which, Yu Qianzhou's seniority was quite high. Ong Kwang-tsung's seniority was at the 11th generation disciple, And when he met Yu Qianzhou, who was a ninth-generation disciple, he had to call him martial granduncle. How Xianxia had never accepted a disciple, and Yu Qianzhou was the first. After crossing a courtyard wall, Yu Qianzhou was shocked. Looking around, the back mountain was built along the mountain range, and there were probably more than 1,000 houses of various sizes. To be able to build such a large building complex on such a high mountain, one must have a lot of power. The evaluation that Yu Qianzhou gave to Ong Guangtsung was one word: rich. Looking along the pebbled road, the style of the houses was not the same, and most of them had a courtyard. The houses and courtyards were all of different sizes. How Xianxia led Yu Qianzhou to a house that wasn't small, and the courtyard wasn't small either. After entering, How Xianxia said, "I live here alone and there are many rooms. You can choose any one." Yu Qianzhou was a little dumbfounded when he entered. From the outside the house looked good, but when he got closer, there was an indescribable smell, and it was very unpleasant. At that time he thought, is this the smell of the legendary pills? Now he couldn't believe it. Is this the smell of cultivators? The stench of alcohol, sweat, feet, and all sorts of garbage piled up to give off a putrid smell. Looking, that. Yu Qianzhou couldn't tell what they were. There were black piles here and there, and they were almost taller than the courtyard walls. They emitted a messy stench, and there wasn't even a single weed in the entire courtyard. He felt like vomiting on the spot, but in order to give his master face, he forcefully held it in. He couldn't believe that a living person could live in a house like this. When Master said that he could choose any room to live in, he nodded with tears, not because he was moved but because of the smell. Using his own words to describe it, it was more king hot than cutting onions. Yu Qianzhou just wanted to give his master the word beast. How Xianxia seemed to know what Yu Qianzhou was thinking. He took a pot of wine, took a sip, and said with a smile, "I haven't cleaned for more than 100 years, just make do with it." More than 100 years. Faster thief. Yu Qianzhou finally couldn't hold it in anymore and ran outside to vomit. In the following half a month, Yu Qianzhou fully displayed his hard-working spirit. He rested at sunset and worked at sunrise. During the day he dressed up as a ninja turtle, carrying bags of things that everyone avoided and threw them down the cliff. At night he slept in the wild forest with the sky as his blanket and the ground as his bed. Another half a month later, the house that was washed by Shui Chongquan looked brand new. Fragrant flowers were planted everywhere. Yu Qianzhou finally chose a room for himself, and the process was unspeakably painful. He also understood why all the houses within a radius of 100 meters around his master were empty. "I see smoke rising again, twilight covers the earth. I want to ask Smoke, where are you going? The sunset is poetic, the dusk is picturesque." It was still the same courtyard, and under the setting sun, smoke rose in spirals. Yu Qianzhou hummed a little song, wearing a hat made of banana leaves, and was very busy. The homemade oven was filled with things, and he was holding a brush, dipping it in sauce and smearing it on the baked food. During this period of time he made a lot of strange things to flatter his master. His purpose was self-evident. "What kind of bullsh tea song are you singing again? It's so bad." How Xianxia scolded jokingly, holding a bamboo stick in his hand, skewering frogs, pheasants, rabbit meat. The surroundings were filled with an alluring fragrance. Under the moonlight, an old man and a young man were lying on two simple bamboo chairs, holding a wine pot in one hand and eating roasted meat in the other. Between the two of them was an oven, and the fire was extinguished, giving off residual heat as it warmly roasted the roasted meat. The two of them could eat whenever they wanted, and it was very convenient. "Master, don't throw away the bamboo sticks after you finish eating. Please cherish the fruits of my labor." "Hee. I've gotten used to throwing them away. I'll definitely change. How are my friends from abroad?" Yu Qianzhou was lying on the chair, looking at the sky full of stars, and his heart was filled with 1,000 knots. Maybe it was because Mount Qingguang was relatively high, but the sparkling stars were exceptionally bright. He drank a mouthful of wine and asked weakly, "Master, I've been here for 3 months, when are you going to start teaching me cultivation?" Next to the oven, a drunken hiccup sounded out. "Qianzhou, I've already told you your innate talent is too poor and you can't cultivate at all. Even if I teach you cultivation, it's just a waste of time. Why don't you give up? Do you think Master will lie to you?" "I really can't accept this. I came with a heart full of enthusiasm, but now it has turned into a heart full of grief and indignation. AI. Even those 11th generation disciples dare to mock and ridicule me when they see me. Fine. It's fine, I'll endure it. But when will these days come to an end? Don't tell me I don't even have a chance to turn things around? Master. Even if it doesn't work, you still have to let me try. You won't even give me such a small chance. As Zhao Wuchou spoke, his voice became softer and softer. Smelling the alcohol, it seemed that he was already drunk. In this period of time he had been like this every day, getting drunk every night like his master. In his low voice, one could still hear that repeated sentence, Master. I really can't accept this. Xianxia sighed softly, his hazy eyes drooping from drunkenness. The two master and disciple started snoring under the bright starlight. When the flat ground slightly turned white, the clouds floating halfway up Mount Qingguang had already been dyed golden by the sun that had just jumped out of the horizon. The clouds swallowed up the fog and the clouds were overflowing with multicolored light. The peak of Mount Qingguang was the first to be sprinkled with a golden color. Lying on the bamboo chair, Yu Qianchou, who was dreaming of meeting his fairy sister, felt his chest shake as if he had been hit by something. He raised his hand to block the golden color that illuminated all things. Just as he sat up, something fell from his body. Needless to say, it was definitely Master who hit him. He stretched and casually picked it up. It was a book. On the blue cover, the words Mysterious Heaven's Skill were written. Yu Qianchou glanced at it and didn't pay much attention to it. Just as he was about to throw it to the side, he was suddenly startled and looked at it in disbelief. At the bottom corner of the cover, there were two small words, Elementary. Wow! Yu Qianchou jumped happily. The book in his hand was the Elementary Skill of Ong Kwang-tsung, Mysterious Heaven's Skill. He had long heard of it, but it was a pity that he had never had the chance. After being happy, he tightly hugged it to his chest. Turning around, Master Xianxia was looking at him with a smile. Yu Qianchou suddenly felt that this old fellow was too cute, and he was so excited that he couldn't speak. Xianxia laughed heartily as he returned to the house and lightly said, Although I haven't taught you anything, I know that you have been preparing for cultivation these few months. I believe that you should be able to understand this book, so you don't need me to teach you anymore. If there's anything you don't understand, you can come and find me at any time. Yu Qianchou hugged the book and tears welled up in his eyes. He raised his hand to wipe them away and knelt down with a plop and kowtowed 3 times. In life, what could be happier than tasting one's desire? He kowtowed 3 times with sincerity, and in his heart he really regarded Xianxia as his master. Yu Qianchou stayed in his own room for almost a month, and he had already memorized the Qi refinement entry-level cultivation method by heart. Unless he was hungry, he almost never stepped out of the courtyard. Xianxia, who often pestered him for food, also didn't disturb him. According to the cultivation method, the first thing to do was to feel the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, and then absorb it for one's own use. But this blockhead of a body spent almost a month, and he didn't even feel a fart, let alone the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Thinking of the evaluation of him by the old fellows Ong Kwang-tsung and the other old fellows, he felt miserable. But he also refused to give up. If he was the kind of person who retreated when faced with difficulties, he wouldn't have become the infamous Bosqua in his previous life. There was a saying in a certain TV series that he deeply agreed with. Don't abandon, don't give up. Another 2 months later, Yu Qianchou became impatient in his room. There was no reaction. During this period of time he often encouraged himself with the story of the tortoise and the hare. But this feeling of not making any progress, no one could stand it. Feeling that there was something wrong with his mentality, he decided to stop and go out for a walk to adjust his mentality. He believed that there would be a day when an iron bar could be ground into a needle. Stretching his limbs, he wandered out of the courtyard. Xianxia, who was leaning against the door with a wine pot in his arms, sighed and shook his head as he watched the figure leave. Ong Kwang-tsung had many disciples, and along the way he met many familiar and strange faces, many of whom pointed at him. Yu Qianchou didn't go out much, but his reputation as a useless person had already spread throughout Ong Kwang-tsung. Those familiar faces, for example the 2 11th generation disciples who were walking in front of him, had naturally conversed before. One of them said, Yo, granduncle, have you had your fill? The other person said, What are you saying? Granduncle can't come out if he's not full. Eating, drinking, and defecating all day long, anyone would be sick of it. It's okay to not eat a meal. Granduncle, do you think I'm right? The two of them burst into laughter. That was the content of his conversation with those familiar faces. Some of the masters even used him as a negative example to educate their disciples. Xianxia was already used to this. He smiled and brushed past the two of them. For a person who was originally high and mighty with a prideful heart, to calmly face these rumors and mockery, the bitterness was not something an outsider could understand. He himself was engraved in his bones. Looking around, Ong Guangzheng had many beautiful female disciples. Xianxia sighed in his heart, but from the trace of mockery in the other party's eyes, he couldn't say the word picking up girls anymore. He clearly knew that he had lost that qualification. Even if it was based on appearance, the current Xianxia's stinky appearance was not up to standard. Did he want to use his kindness to move them? Xianxia wasn't that stupid. Or should he shamelessly pester them? He didn't have the confidence to do that. To him it was no different from begging for pity. In his own words, he could do despicable, shameless and lowly things, but he couldn't be a despicable, shameless and lowly person. As a person he couldn't lose the most basic integrity. From this, it could be seen that deep down Xianxia was still that arrogant triad boss. His eyes swept past the long swords carried by passers-by and he was secretly envious. That was the symbol of a disciple who had reached Qi training level 4. The Qi training stage was divided into 3 levels: intermediate, and final. Breaking through level 3 to level 4 was intermediate. Ong Guangzheng would give you a weapon, a specially made long sword. Compared to the ordinary long swords, it was definitely better. In order to avoid those mocking eyes, it could be said to be a subconscious escape. Xianxia walked towards the depths of the back mountain. The secluded seniors of the Green Sky sect lived in the back mountain. Normal disciples didn't dare to disturb them. He also knew this and walked with a vague feeling of worship. Looking at the end of the road, there were dozens of simple and unadorned buildings hidden in the forest. Xianxia stopped and didn't dare to go any further. Even the sect master Lu Chongqing didn't dare to barge into the residences of those seniors. This was also the first time he came here. He couldn't go any further, it wasn't a place he could go. Sighing, he turned around and wanted to go back the way he came. After walking a few steps he suddenly stopped. There seemed to be a deserted path in the forest beside him, extending down the mountain. He didn't know where it led to. If he didn't look carefully he really wouldn't be able to see it. He could vaguely see that there used to be a path. Xianxia hesitated a little but still decided to go over and take a look. Stepping on the wild road that was densely covered with thorns, he carefully went over. He walked all the way down the mountain. After walking for about an hour, stone steps suddenly appeared under his feet. The gaps of the stone steps were full of weeds, almost completely covering it. The road was winding and he didn't know where it led. The surrounding trees were dense and gloomy. Xianxia had the thought of going back, but after walking for such a long time he couldn't help but have a trace of curiosity and continued to walk. After a cup of tea's time he heard the sound of water flowing and he couldn't help but quicken his pace. Suddenly his eyes opened up and he had already reached the end of the road. A wave of mist rushed over and what came into view was a waterfall, flowing straight down from the cliff. Below was a pool that was washed out by the waterfall day and night. Around the pool between the mountain caves, it was obvious that it was artificially dug out. A stone tablet about 2 meters tall stood beside the pool. From Xianxia's point of view he didn't know what was written on the stone tablet. He hurriedly walked over. Forbidden area was blood red and it was imposing. It was as if the 2 big words were carved on the stone tablet. Xianxia was slightly shocked and he wondered if he had trespassed into a place he shouldn't have. He couldn't help but look along the path beside the stone tablet, and a dark cave was hidden behind the waterfall. Chapter 8. He would be lying if he said he didn't want to go in and take a look. Xianxia hesitated for a long time before dismissing the idea. The surrounding atmosphere was not right. The prelude to danger in movies was like this. The 2 blood-red words were especially conspicuous. Suddenly the sound of a zither came from inside the cave. It was mixed with the sound of flowing water. Although it was not clear, it was definitely the sound of a zither. Xianxia, who had turned around resolutely, stopped and listened attentively. Damn it, what's this? Isn't this seducing me? Forget it, I'll go in and take a look. Xianxia made up his mind and walked towards the cave. As the saying goes, curiosity killed the cat. It should be applicable to humans too. He didn't know if this was an example. Standing at the entrance of the cave, a gust of cold air hit him. Xianxia shivered. It was so dark inside that he couldn't see his fingers. The waterfall behind him was deafening, but he couldn't hear the sound inside. His body was already half wet. Xianxia gritted his teeth and walked in. After turning a corner, he couldn't see anything in front of him. His hand touched the stone wall that was covered in moss and he slowly felt his way in. After walking for a while, although he couldn't see anything, he could feel that the terrain was going downwards. Damn it! Where does it lead to? Xianxia, who was in the dark, felt his teeth aching. The sound of the zither became clearer. Suddenly, there seemed to be a light in front of him. He was stunned for a moment and immediately used his hands and feet to speed up. The light became brighter and brighter. When he got closer, he realized that he had reached the end of the tunnel. A huge underground space was in front of him, and the surroundings were filled with glowing fluorescent stones. A pool of water lay quietly in the grotto without any ripples. There were many small islands in the pool and there was a pavilion in the middle of the island. There seemed to be a person sitting inside and it seemed to be a woman. The sound of the zither came from there. There was a stone bridge under Xianxia's feet, which led to the pavilion on the small island. Damn it! What kind of *T forbidden place is this? There's actually a woman hiding inside. I was so scared. Xianxia snorted. He clasped his hands behind his back and walked along the stone bridge. Xianxia, who had walked to the pavilion, instantly widened his eyes and mouth, almost drooling. The woman in front of him was dressed in plain white without any adornment. A simple silk ribbon held her hair in place. Her bright eyes were filled with sorrow as she stared at the zither on the stone platform. Her slender hands gently stroked the zither strings. He didn't seem to notice Xianxia standing in front of him. Although this woman didn't wear any makeup, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was devastatingly beautiful. Perhaps even the words heavenly beauty and peerless elegance were insufficient to describe her beauty. She just sat there quietly and played the zither, unable to hide the sadness in her eyes, making one's heart ache. The sound of the zither was filled with hidden bitterness, as if it was recounting the pain of yearning for his lover. Xianxia suddenly felt that this gloomy stone room wasn't illuminated by the fluorescent stones. It was her. Xianxia only now realized that the fairy sister who had been wandering in his dreams was nothing more than this. Although she was slightly younger than the one in front of him, but compared to her she was only a green leaf setting off a red flower. This young man greets the young lady. Xianxia, who didn't know what to say for a long time, bowed and finally squeezed out a sentence. His heart was thumping non-stop. When he raised his head, he found that he was nothing in the eyes of the beauty in the pavilion. She didn't even bother to look at him, let alone pay attention to him. Like a child who had made a mistake, Xianxia smiled embarrassedly. He didn't care about her rudeness and thought, the beauty might be playing the zither absent-mindedly and didn't hear me at all. It's okay. Although I don't understand what she was playing, isn't there a saying that goes meeting a bosom friend in high mountains and flowing water? Today I'll pretend to listen to Boya playing the zither. It's not bad to be able to meet a beautiful bosom friend. Thinking about it, he lifted his foot to walk into the pavilion. Just as his body was about to step into the pavilion, he felt an invisible wall blocking him. No matter how hard Zhao Wuchou tried, he couldn't walk in. With the beauty in front of him, he was a little angry and couldn't help but slam into it. Bam! A purple light screen flashed, accompanied by a huge rebound, immediately bounced Xianxia a few meters away, making him dizzy. When he got up, he saw that on the 4 pillars supporting the pavilion, there were 4 engraved talismans shining with purple light. When the purple light disappeared, the talismans also disappeared, and the purple light screen also disappeared without a trace. F***ck. Which bastard did this? Xianxia was furious. He couldn't pretend to be polite anymore and cursed. After cursing, he came to his senses and wanted to slap himself. How could he say vulgar words in front of such a beauty? He felt that he had lost a lot of face. However, looking at the beauty's indifferent expression, he was like a clown. After blushing, he walked over with a serious expression and asked seriously, "Did those old farts on Guangzheng imprison you?" The beauty still ignored him and continued to play the zither. After that, he changed all kinds of questions, but she still didn't respond. In the end, Yu Qianqiu, whose pride was hurt, got nothing. He walked out of the cave dejectedly. Not long after he left, a white silhouette flew in. It was a beautiful girl. She walked to the outside of the pavilion and sat down. She supported her beautiful face with her legs and quietly listened to the woman in the pavilion playing the zither. If Yu Qianqiu saw this girl, he would definitely be shocked. Wasn't this the fairy sister that he dreamed of? "Master, let me ask you something." Xianxia, who was holding the wine pot, looked up and saw his disciple's impotent look. He couldn't help but smile. "What is it?" "Do you know about the stone cave in the back mountain?" Yu Qianqiu asked. "Why, you went there?" Xianxia was stunned. Seeing his disciple nodding, he immediately said, "That was the place where criminals were imprisoned. There used to be many powerful disciples guarding it, so it was listed as a forbidden area. Nowadays the cultivation world is quite peaceful. It hasn't been used for hundreds of years. Otherwise, how could you have entered?" "That can't be right." Yu Qianqiu was puzzled. "Why did I see an imprisoned woman in there?" "Oh, you're talking about that white fox spirit. She was imprisoned by the previous sect master 200 years ago. Originally, she was imprisoned for 100 years so that she could repent and turn over a new leaf. When the time limit was up, she refused to come out, so she kept staying there." "White fox spirit?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. "Master, you're saying she's a fox spirit? What's so strange about that?" "A fox spirit that has cultivated for 1,000 years can naturally transform into a human form." Xianxia suddenly stopped and looked at his disciple up and down. He smiled strangely. "Disciple, don't tell me you fell in love with her because she's pretty?" Tisk. Yu Qianqiu felt guilty. He made a fake sound and changed the topic. "Master, tell me quickly, why was she imprisoned by the previous sect master?" "I'm warning you, humans and demons are different. Don't have any ideas about her. Otherwise, don't blame me for not warning you if she sucked your essence dry." Xianxia seemed to see through his disciple's thoughts. After reminding him carefully, he drank a mouthful of wine and sighed. "She's a demon trapped by love." After listening to his master's narration, Yu Qianqiu felt that it was really a cliché story. However, he couldn't help but sigh. It turned out that the woman in the pavilion was really a white fox spirit that had cultivated for 1,000 years. Before she cultivated into a human form, she was injured by a hunter. Fortunately, a scholar saved her. 1,000 years later, the white fox spirit cultivated into a human form and looked for her savior to repay the kindness. She found a handsome young man. The white fox believed that he was her savior in his previous life. The young man didn't know the true identity of the young woman. He was shocked by her beauty and finally fell in love with her. They became husband and wife. In the following days, the two of them loved each other. The young man studied hard in order to get a place in the imperial examinations and bring honor to his ancestors. The young woman washed her clothes and took good care of him. Hard work paid off. After studying hard for 10 years, the young man really got a place in the imperial examinations. As expected, he got the first place in the imperial examinations. The only regret was that the two of them didn't have a child of their own for many years. It could also be the reason for the combination of human and demon. The young man became the top scholar and the disciple of the emperor. His status suddenly became extraordinary. The prime minister of the Wuxia Empire took a fancy to him and wanted to recruit him. However, he already had a wife at home, so he couldn't do it. The prime minister was angry and hinted that if he still wanted to achieve great things, he should divorce his wife at home. Otherwise, he would make his future bleak. The top scholar was in a dilemma. On one side was a good wife and on the other side was a proud daughter. It was really difficult to choose. But in the end, he couldn't resist the despotic power of the prime minister. With the reason that he couldn't have children and couldn't pass on the incense, he divorced his wife. The white fox was in so much pain that she wanted to die. She knew that she was a demon and really couldn't give birth to her husband's family. She silently accepted her husband's letter of divorce. Although she was divorced, the young woman still loved the young man deeply and had been waiting for him in secret. Not long after the prime minister's daughter married the top scholar, she suddenly died of illness. Hearing people's slander, the prime minister was furious. He mistakenly thought that the top scholar was dissatisfied with his daughter and killed her. With the power of the prime minister, there was no need to say what would happen to a new official. At that time the white fox had something to do and left. When she returned, her sweetheart had been beheaded. The white fox was heartbroken. In a rage, she killed hundreds of people in the prime minister's mansion. This matter shocked the whole capital. The national master was no match for the white fox, so he invited the head of the Ong Kwang Tsung. This led to the white fox being imprisoned. Men easily bend for power and women easily hurt by love. This has been the case since ancient times. Yu Qianzhou sighed. He finally knew the reason why the beauty was so sad and sad. Although he knew that the beauty was a fox spirit, that unparalleled face lingered in his mind for a long time. In the following days he couldn't calm down at all. The forbidden stone cave was still dark. Although he had his master's advice, Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but come again. Yu Qianzhou's heart was perturbed, but he resolutely turned around and walked out of the cave with firm steps. He thought to himself, 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Damn. Why aren't you asking me to stay? Wait until I'm out, I won't be able to hear you anymore. The white fox's eyes were filled with tears. Suddenly she realized that the person in front of her was no longer there. She came back to her senses and saw the back of the person walking out. She hurriedly shouted, "Young master, please wait." It's okay. Big sister over 1,000 years old, I thought you were mute. I'm scared. I'm so scared that my little heart is thumping. However, when a beauty opens her mouth, it's really different. She even called out, "Young master, please wait," so nicely. My bones are going soft. My hardcore fan is here. Yu Qianzhou was extremely pleased that his little plan had succeeded. He put on a look that he thought was handsome and slowly turned around. He said indifferently, "Miss, don't worry. Are you calling me?" The white fox stood up and bowed to him. "Young master, may I ask, where did the song you sang just now come from?" What a good figure. Every frown and movement was enough to captivate the soul. No wonder the shrews in his previous life scolded women who seduced their husbands as vixens. Yu Qianzhou was a little infatuated. He forcefully suppressed his shaking soul and sighed, "I'm Ong Kwang Tsung's disciple. I heard about your story a few days ago and came to see you once. Seeing that you're so sentimental, I'm deeply moved. I especially played along with your zither and gave you a song to express my admiration for you." But in his heart he prayed, "Sister Chinrue from Earth, I'm borrowing your song to pick up girls. Please don't stoop to my level. I've sinned. You flatter me, young master." The white fox finished speaking and hesitated. She said uneasily, "I have a presumptuous request. I hope young master can agree to it." Yu Qianzhou frowned and thought, "What presumptuous request? Do you want to suck me dry? I won't do that." The white fox saw that he was hesitating and was afraid that he would not agree. She quickly added, "Can young master teach me this song? I'll definitely repay you after I master it." "What kind of repayment? Devote yourself to me? No way. Master said that I'll be sucked dry by you." Yu Qianzhou thought about it and realized that this was the other party's request. He walked to the pavilion and said generously, "Such a small matter is only natural. Getting to know each other is fate. Don't talk about repaying me generously. From today onwards we are friends. It's fine as long as we keep in touch." This shameless thing had set a tone for the relationship between the two of them. "When young master was singing just now, I was lost in thought. Can young master sing it again?" The white fox was a little shy. She felt that this request was too much. Yu Qianzhou's heart skipped a beat. He could not believe that the shy beauty in front of him was the fox spirit that killed hundreds of people in one breath. He did not reject it anymore. He gathered his emotions and sang a sad song, "I'm a fox that has cultivated for 1,000 years." After the song, the white fox bowed and said, "Thank you, young master. I've learned a lot. Young master, please correct me." After she finished speaking, she sat down and started to play the zither. The faint sound of the zither could be heard. Her red lips opened slightly and her pearly white teeth could be faintly seen. She sang a song that was even more authentic than Xianxia's. The sound of the zither and the song echoed in the cave. "Young master, do you think this is okay?" The white fox stood up and asked. "Damn it. This girl is a genius at singing. After listening to a pirated version, she can actually sing the original version. I sweat." Xianxia felt ashamed in his heart. He immediately clapped his hands and said, not bad, the sound of nature. Young master is too kind. I still haven't asked what the name of this song is." The white fox bowed and said. Xianxia smiled and said, "I made it for you. Let's call it White Fox. Young master composes a song for me. You're truly my soulmate. With this song as my companion, my life has not been in vain." After she finished speaking, she walked out of the zither and bowed to Xianxia. Xianxia felt a little guilty. He waved his hand in embarrassment and looked around. He frowned and said, "Lady, do you really want to spend the rest of your life here?" In the pavilion, the white fox took light steps and said sadly, "Time in the mountains is like a ray of light. The world is prosperous for 1,000 years. To me it makes no difference where I am. Sung is full of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Young master doesn't look like a cultivator. Why are you here on Mount Qingguang?" This question touched Xianxia's sore spot. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. He told her how he came to Mount Qingguang and how he became a trash in Sung. "So that's how it is." The white fox nodded and said, "It is hard to find a soulmate. Being able to meet young master is fate. Allow me to do my best." After she finished speaking, she patted her chest. She opened her red lips and spat out a golden pearl floating in the air. The white fox pointed with her 2 fingers and the golden pearl flew out of the pavilion. A purple light screen immediately appeared around the pavilion, blocking the pearl. The white fox's jade-like fingers pinched the golden pearl. The pearl trembled and a layer of ripples appeared on the purple light screen. The golden pearl slowly squeezed out of the light screen. It floated in front of Xianxia. "This is for me?" Xianxia caught it and asked in astonishment. The white fox nodded and said, "That year it was for this item that my husband's life was delayed. This made me feel endless regret. Ever since I obtained it, I have never used it. However, there is no doubt about the effect of this item. When I was imprisoned, my cultivation had just reached the late stage of nascent soul. I have not cultivated for 200 years. Now I have unexpectedly reached the late stage of passing tribulation. As for the other uses of this item, I have never studied it and do not know. However, it will definitely have a miraculous effect on changing young master's physique. This point I am deeply aware of. Young master can directly consume it." Xianxia was shocked. He had never cultivated before. To be able to reach the late stage of passing tribulation from the late stage of nascent soul in 200 years, that was a gap of 3 whole levels. As a person in Sung, even if he had never eaten pork, he had seen pigs run. Ordinary cultivators, even if they wholeheartedly cultivated, would rarely be able to smoothly cultivate from the late stage of nascent soul to the late stage of passing tribulation in 200 years. This point could be seen from the fact that the head of Sung, Lu Chongqing, was only able to reach the middle stage of nascent soul in 200 years. Truly a good treasure. Xianxia exclaimed. The white fox raised her hand and gestured, "Young master." The former nodded and glanced at the little bit of red lips. She thought to herself, "It came out of her mouth and was swallowed into my mouth. I don't know if this counts as an indirect kiss." Smelling the faint fragrance of the bead, she raised her head and swallowed it into her mouth. Only then did he realize that this egg-sized item was very difficult to swallow. The white fox made a finger seal at him. Xianxia felt a huge pain in his throat as if it was about to be torn apart. The golden pearl had already entered his body. Chapter 9. How Sansi leaned against the door. His disciple came back happily. He didn't know what was wrong with him. He didn't even greet him and went back to his nest. As soon as the latter entered the room, he threw himself on the bed and covered his head with the quilt. He stuck out his butt and laughed crazily. He didn't expect that a song could be exchanged for such a treasure. No wonder people in his previous life said that knowledge could change one's fate. He was a good example. Thinking of this, he couldn't wait to get up and sit cross-legged. He used the mysterious heaven method to feel the aura of heaven and earth. After a night, he didn't feel any aura at all. Instead, he sat until his butt was numb. Xianxia was so sleepy that he yawned. He couldn't take it anymore and fell asleep. When he woke up, he was a bit puzzled. He swallowed a treasure, but why didn't there be any reaction? This didn't conform to the rules of the main character. Another month passed. Xianxia didn't know what happened to his disciple. There was no smile on his face. Day by day, his face became more and more gloomy. It was a bit green. Xianxia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't know what he swallowed. Anyway, he had a lot of feces and urine these days, so he got dirty easily. He almost became a fertilizer supplier for the fields. Could it be that everything he ate turned into waste and was excreted? He asked himself. He also asked the white fox, but she didn't know the reason either. Xianxia suspected that this treasure was only effective for monsters and not for humans. As the days passed, he was more and more sure of his guess. The new talent assembly, which was held once every 10 years, was about to begin. It was the most nervous moment for the disciples of the last phase of the aura training stage. At that time, all the cultivators in the world would gather and compete on the same stage. The number of foundation building pills would be decided by the number of matches. What was foundation building pill? It was an indispensable pill for cultivators to enter the foundation building stage from the aura training stage. It was refined by all the sects with money and effort. The refined foundation building pills couldn't meet the needs of all the disciples. There was a big gap. A part of it would be divided equally and the other part would be left to be seen. The new talent assembly was created. All the sects would send their strongest disciples of the last phase of the aura training stage to participate in the competition. The more matches they won, the more foundation building pills they would get. As for how the various sects would distribute the pills after obtaining them, that was their own business. For example, in Ongquang Tsung, every participating disciple was guaranteed a foundation building pill. After seeing the imprisoned woman in the forbidden cave, she, who had always been confident in her appearance, immediately knew who was superior and who was inferior. It had already been a few years, and she hadn't spoken a single word to the imprisoned woman. One time, when she was flipping through the ancient books in the sect's scripture pavilion, she found out that the woman was a fox spirit that cultivated into a human form. She was shocked and amazed by her beauty, especially because she played the zither very well. She faintly missed her, just like how she felt for senior martial brother Lu. It had been a few years and she never got tired of listening to it. Every time she missed senior martial brother Lu but couldn't see him, she would come here. Thinking of senior martial brother Lu, she couldn't help but quicken her pace. She took out a fluorite and quickly shuttled through the dark cave. Hey! Someone is singing. The singing, accompanied by the sound of the zither, made her stop. After a little hesitation, Chu Pinger walked into the grotto and covered her mouth in surprise. She really couldn't believe that the woman who hadn't spoken a word for several years was actually singing. Chu Pinger flew to the pavilion and confirmed that her eyes weren't playing tricks on her. After a long time, she slowly sat down, supported her chin with her legs, and listened to the woman singing the bitter past. I'm a fox that has cultivated for 1,000 years. Did anyone see me dance in the dim light? When I left you, you were in the middle of the Golden Roll nomination. The vows of undying love turned into nothingness. Chu Pinger listened to the song and could already imagine the past of the white fox. The woman in white clothes like snow, who was heartbroken, danced in the dark, looked at the man drinking and chatting merrily in the dim light, only hoping that he would look at her again, and know that she was dancing for him. 2 lines of tears fell silently from Chu Pinger's eyes. When she listened to it for the second time, she was choking with tears. When she listened to it for the third time, she was already a complete mess, with tears streaming down her face. She couldn't listen to it anymore. She stood up abruptly, wiped her tears and ran out of the grotto. When she ran out of the grotto, Chu Pinger was still immersed in the story, choking with tears. It seemed that this kind of thing was too destructive to innocent girls. She wondered what young master you would think if he knew about it. After a long time, Chu Pinger finally stopped and looked at the cave behind the waterfall in a daze. She only came back to her senses when she felt her face was wet. She raised her hand to wipe it away and her hands were full of tears. She couldn't help but stomp her feet and say, "Aya. My face is all wet from crying. What if I meet Senior Marshal Brother Lu? What should I do?" She turned to look at the clear pool under the waterfall. She seemed to have thought of something and looked around. She didn't know that behind the forest not far away, Xianxia was looking at her with his mouth wide open. He also didn't know why, with Chu Pinger's cultivation, even the useless Xianxia didn't notice her. That face couldn't be any more familiar. It was the fairy sister that Xianxia had been dreaming of, but he didn't expect her to be Ong Kwangsung's disciple. A certain someone kept shouting in his heart, "Fate, fate, if this isn't fate then what is? It's really King Fate. What does fairy sister want to do?" Chu Pinger walked to the side of the pool, took down the long sword on her back and placed it by her feet. She then gently untied her snow-white gown, revealing her curvaceous figure. After putting down her gown, her slender hands started to untie the buttons on her collar, one by one. I'm rich. I'm rich." Xianxia was dumbstruck. His mouth opened even wider and he shouted in his heart, "Strip, strip, continue stripping." As he wished, Chu Pinger, who was by the side of the pool, revealed her creamy skin and 4 limbs. Her slender legs were slender and elegant, and her white lotus-like arms were behind her back. Her slender jade-like fingers pulled on a red rope. Cake seller. The legendary red doo-doo. Heavens, you're not messing with me, are you? Xianxia didn't dare to believe that the fairy sister that he had been dreaming of for the first time was actually putting on a strip show for him. He put his finger into his mouth and bit down hard. So painful. This wasn't a dream. I can't waste a heavenly treasure. I'll continue admiring. Chapter 10. Black hair. Jade body. On the upright steamed bun, 2 red cherries jumped up and down. A certain someone swallowed his saliva and murmured, "Protruding front and back, long legs, beautiful bubbling." A thread of sparkling and translucent liquid came out from the corner of his mouth. His nasal cavity was hot and 2 streams of liquid flowed out. He stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. It was a little salty. He raised his hand and wiped it. The back of his hand was bright red. F***ck. I have a nosebleed. Xianxia screamed. Who? A scream came from the side of the pool. Chu Pinger, who was just about to go into the water, heard someone speak. She was scared out of her wits. She hurriedly hugged her clothes and hid behind the stone tablet. How embarrassing, I've been discovered. Why would I have a nosebleed at this time? Hurry up and run. Xianxia smiled bitterly in his heart. Without saying anything else, he turned around and ran up the mountain. Unfortunately, before he could run far, a white shadow flitted over his head. Chu Pinger with a red face blocked his way. Clang. A shining long sword was unsheathed and placed on Xianxia's neck. Chu Pinger's eyes were burning with anger. With one look she could tell that this person did not have any cultivation. He was completely an ordinary person. However, he was wearing Ong Kwangsung's clothes. Her voice trembled a little as she shouted, "Who are you? Don't misunderstand, don't misunderstand. Ong Kwangsung's 9th generation disciple Xianxia. We're on the same side, we're on the same side." This girl was burning with anger. Xianxia was afraid that she would act impulsively and hurriedly explained. The angry and ashamed Chu Pinger was slightly stunned. The name of the trash Xianxia in Ong Kwangsung was known by everyone. Naturally, she had heard of him. She did not expect that it was this person. It was impossible for an ordinary person to go up Mount Qingguang. Seeing that he did not have any cultivation, she thought for a bit and knew that what he said was true. Looking at the shameless smile of the man in front of her, especially the blood on his face, Chu Pinger really wanted to stab him with her sword. He actually dared to peep at her while she was bathing. He was simply shameless. However, in terms of seniority, this person was his martial uncle. Although he hated him, he did not dare to make a move. Trash was trash. Their seniority was right there. As long as the other party didn't mind, it didn't matter. However, since she dared to lay a hand on her martial uncle, Ong Kwangsung's sect rules were not to be trifled with. It was not something that she, Chu Pinger, could bear. Chu Ping'er was so angry that her whole body was trembling when she thought about how she was seen naked by this pervert, but she couldn't do anything about it. Of course, if she were to complain to the sect, Yu Qianzhou would definitely have to bear the consequences. But would she do such a thing? In this era of strict etiquette, if this matter were to be publicized, it would be tantamount to ruining her innocence. She was afraid that her sweetheart would never look at her again. Chu Ping'er gritted her teeth and said, "What did you see? Don't be impulsive. Impulsiveness is the devil." With the sword on her neck, this girl's hands were trembling badly. Yu Qianzhou was really afraid of her. He first comforted her, then replied, "I really didn't see you take off your clothes." He really wanted to slap himself. "Pig. Since you didn't see it, how do you know that I took off my clothes? Aren't you looking for excitement?" As expected. "What did you say?" Chu Ping'er roared hysterically. Pain came from his neck. Yu Qianzhou felt the sword had already cut into his skin. He hurriedly said, "I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything." Silence. The two of them maintained this posture and stood there motionlessly. Wrong. Yu Qianzhou did not dare to move. He looked at Chu Ping'er pitifully, like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, praying for mercy. After a long time, Chu Ping'er's face turned cold. Words jumped out from her pink lips one by one. Despicable, shameless, vulgar, scum, hooligan, beast. After that she kicked Yu Qianzhou's chest. F***ck. The latter screamed in pain and rolled down the mountain. Dying under a peony flower, becoming a ghost is also a romantic. Which bastard said that? Damn it. If you have the guts, try it. Yu Qianzhou, who was lying in a pile of thorns, groaned in pain. After spending a long time he finally got up. When he looked up, the tigress had already left. His body was hurting everywhere. The thorns were pulled out one by one. He walked back unsteadily. "Who did it?" Xianxia asked in a deep voice. His face was frighteningly pale. Usually, everyone looked down on his disciple. He also knew that it was normal to be mocked. His disciple was indeed too much. But daring to lay a hand on his disciple, did he really think that he, Elder Ong Kwangtsung, was a clay figurine? "I accidentally rolled down the mountain. It's not anyone else's fault." Yu Qianzhou grimaced in pain. A footprint on your chest, a sword wound on your neck. You can even fall like this. Xianxia sneered. He grabbed his disciple's hand and dragged him out. "Follow me to the Green Light Hall. We're going to reason with sect leader Xixiang." "Wait!" Yu Qianzhou shouted. How would he dare to go to the Green Light Hall? He would be chased down the mountain. Thinking that his master was not an old-fashioned person, he smiled bitterly and told him what happened. Actually, he did not want to say it. It wasn't something to be proud of. He had to say it. The old man's face was so black that it could bite someone to death. Of course, he emphasized that he did not intentionally see a beauty undressing. Xianxia, who was grabbing his disciple's hand, was stunned. His facial muscles twitched and he suddenly lost his anger. After a long time he said, "You deserve it." "Master, let's not talk about whether I deserve it or not. Help me remove the thorns on my back first." After a night, Yu Qianzhou suddenly found that his body that was riddled with holes had recovered. There was not even a scar. His swollen face had recovered to its original state. He could not help but praise Ong Kwangtsung for being a blessed land. Not only was it rich in spiritual energy, but it also healed so quickly. He did not come all the way here in vain. Feeling refreshed, he walked around the courtyard a few times, stretching his muscles and bones. But the way his master looked at him seemed a little strange. As the saying goes, once a scar is healed, forget the pain. He was referring to people like Yu Qianzhou. These few days he always felt that the scenery of the forbidden pool was not bad. When he had nothing to do, he would go there and take a walk. He comforted himself that he was going to see the white fox. The sunset was infinitely beautiful, but it was nearing dusk. Looking at the sunset, Yu Qianzhou returned from the back of the mountain in disappointment. Along the way he was mentally prepared for the endless sarcastic gazes and words. To paraphrase a saying from his previous life, as long as you come out to mingle, there is no way you won't be stabbed. It was changed to, as long as you come out to walk, there is no place without sarcasm. He was already used to it. He walked back indifferently and passed by a pair of female disciples. When he heard what they said, Xianxia was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped. No, to be exact, it should be a song. If he did not hear wrongly, the two of them were singing, "I am a fox that has waited for 1,000 years. 1,000 years of waiting, 1,000 years of loneliness." Even the tone seemed to be the same. Is there something wrong with my ears? How is this possible? Xianxia dug his ears. He must have heard wrongly. When I loved you, you were penniless and studying hard. When I left you, you were in the bridal chamber of the golden roll. Someone was singing behind him, and the voice was very loud, especially the words "bridal chamber of the golden roll." It sounded like two men were singing together. Although it was out of tune, Xianxia was sure that it was the song he taught the white fox. Turning around, he saw two familiar faces walking towards him. One of them laughed. "Yo, Martial Granduncle is here. You haven't heard the song we are singing, right? This is a song composed by Martial Uncle Chu Pinger. It is very popular in Ongquang. The other person laughed. "You are talking nonsense. Martial Granduncle doesn't have any friends here. Where can he go to listen to this song?" The two of them laughed and left, continuing to sing the song that was out of tune. A song composed by Martial Uncle Chu Pinger. Who is Chu Pinger? Damn it. I was the one who brought it here. How dare you infringe my copyright? Damn it. Xianxia cursed in his heart and shook his head with a bitter smile. He guessed that someone had entered the grotto and heard the white fox's song. Along the way, he heard many people singing the same song. Xianxia was a little numb. When he returned to the courtyard, he saw his master cooking the barbecue. He was a little embarrassed. He had not done any proper work recently and had not been filial to his master for a long time. He actually forced his lazy master to do it himself. He walked in front of his master and picked up the wine pot on the table. He laughed. "Master, you are resting. Let me do it. I am a fox that has been cultivating for 1,000 years. 1,000 years of cultivation is 1,000 years of loneliness." Xianxia nodded and let his disciple do it. Xianxia, who was drinking, was a little surprised. His master seemed to be singing. When he heard what he was singing, he couldn't hold the wine in his mouth and immediately spat it at his master's face. The two of them looked at each other, dumbfounded. Chapter 11. Xianxia's face twitched as he wiped the wine off his face and said hatefully, "Little brat, what are you doing? My throat is sore and I can't hold it in. I think the injuries from last time have not fully healed and I can't stand this smoke. I'll go back first, please forgive me, master." Finished speaking, he ran back to his room. Xianxia patted his chest. His master was almost 200 years old and he had unexpectedly started to sing. Although the action just now was unintentional, it was still very disrespectful. Master's a good person. Thinking about how Xianxia had taken care of him during this period of time and had never put on airs as his master, he could not help but sigh. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, he continued his useless practice. This is... Xianxia, who had entered a state of emptiness, suddenly opened his eyes and his lips trembled as he said, "Spiritual energy." He closed his eyes again in disbelief. It really was spiritual energy. The substance in the air that made people feel refreshed was like a happy little fairy wandering around. Xianxia was so excited that he was trembling a little. It had been almost a year and he had been sitting in a dull and boring manner every day. Countless mocking eyes. Was it really okay? Everything was for persistence and he firmly believed that he would succeed. Happiness came too suddenly and he did not dare to think too much about it. He stabilized his emotions and got rid of all distracting thoughts. Using the mysterious heaven skill that could not be more familiar, he breathed in and out the air. Since he could feel the incoming spiritual energy, he could also retain it and slowly infuse it into his 8 extraordinary meridians, circulating it in his meridians. His whole body was like a precise machine. The loose spiritual energy circulated for a few rounds and turned into a continuous stream of qi, flowing into his dantian like a river flowing into the ocean. The absorption of the spiritual energy became smoother and smoother, methodically circulating under the guidance of the mysterious heaven skill. With the influx of spiritual energy, the dantian, which was originally a ball, inflated like a balloon. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt his whole body warm and comfortable to the point that he let out a slight moan. The spiritual energy of Mount Qingguang was naturally worlds apart from that of the secular world. Otherwise, it would not have attracted the attention of cultivators and become their own. However, if he wanted to inflate his dantian in one go, it was not something that could be done in a short time. Yu Qianqiu, who was immersed in the pleasure, ignored the passage of time and focused on absorbing the spiritual energy. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed, but he was completely unaware of it. His disciple hadn't come out to eat for 2 days. Could it be that he was afraid because he sprayed wine all over his face? Xianxia was a bit worried. Cultivators who didn't need to eat were those who had reached the core formation stage and were able to abstain from eating. If mortals didn't eat for a few days, they would die. Is Master such a petty person? Xianxia's thoughts went astray. He was a little unhappy and decided to enlighten his disciple. He walked over and pushed open the door without saying a word. Yu Qianqiu was sitting cross-legged on the couch with a smile on his face. His forehead was glistening. He didn't look like someone who hadn't eaten for 2 days. He was in good spirits. The mysterious heaven skill is absorbing the spiritual energy. Xianxia's mouth opened so wide that a fist could fit in it. His face was full of surprise and disbelief. He stretched out a trembling hand and released a white true energy from his palm. The white true energy swirled and curled into Yu Qianqiu's mouth and nose. There was no need to think anymore. His disciple had already learned the mysterious heaven skill. Xianxia couldn't help but burst into tears. Could it be that God had opened his eyes? When he accepted Yu Qianqiu in the Green Light Hall, he was afraid that his senior brother would be embarrassed. He didn't want to embarrass his senior brother, so he did him a favor at little cost. Otherwise, no one would accept this kind of disciple who didn't have the slightest cultivation root. Kuang-tsung had been in the cultivation world for thousands of years. He had encountered this kind of thing more than once. But who didn't want their descendants to live to 100 years old? What was the point of entering Kuang-tsung? They all achieved nothing and died of depression before they reached 100 years old. People who didn't have the cultivation root wanted to cultivate. The gap that couldn't be crossed was still vivid. At first, Xianxia didn't care. He just accepted a disciple who did odd jobs. As time went on, Yu Qianqiu's tireless and persistent efforts moved him. He also deeply felt the unwillingness and bitterness in his disciple's heart. But what could he do? He couldn't help at all. He could only try his best to treat Yu Qianqiu better. He hoped that his disciple could live a happy life for decades. Was it really heaven rewards the diligent? Xianxia silently wiped away the tears on his face. Looking at the smile on his disciple's face, he was very comforted. Then he went out and left the door unlocked. He sat down cross-legged at the door. He wanted to protect his disciple. This was the key moment of entering the cultivation world. He must not be disturbed. As the saying goes, the sea can accommodate all rivers and the sea is big. When a cultivator just entered the cultivation world, it was the key moment of forming the dantian. Usually, the more spiritual energy the dantian could absorb in the early stage, the larger the capacity of the dantian. This also meant that the future of cultivation would be higher. At such a moment, Xianxia didn't dare to be careless. In the cultivation world, cultivation was divided into 5 levels: qi refining, foundation establishment, core formation, nascent soul, and tribulation passing. Under normal circumstances, those who couldn't form their dantian for more than 2 days would have a hard time reaching the foundation establishment stage. Foundation establishment was possible in 2 days, core formation was possible in 3 days, nascent soul was possible in 4 days, and tribulation passing was possible in 5 days. Although it was said that it was possible, it didn't rule out other reasons for failure. However, this kind of calculation was basically true in the cultivation world. When Xianxia entered the cultivation world, he had formed his dantian for more than 4 days. Now he had reached the early stage of nascent soul. Now that his disciple had formed his dantian for more than 2 days, it shouldn't be a problem for him to reach the foundation establishment stage. Yu Qianqiu sat on the bed. 2 days had passed and he felt that his dantian had swelled into a ball. It seemed that the speed at which spiritual energy was absorbed had slowed down. He wanted to use spiritual energy to form a bigger ball, but he didn't have the strength to do so. He had read about forming his dantian in the Mysterious Heaven Method book, so he knew about it. However, he had reached his limit. Just as he was about to stop, he suddenly felt something moving in his chest. That thing seemed to be attracted by the vital energy in his dantian and slid towards it. When that thing drilled into his dantian, the originally small dantian suddenly squeezed something in as if it was about to be torn apart. Xianxia was in so much pain that he was sweating all over. He wanted to scream, but he couldn't. There was a loud bang in his mind and an image appeared in his mind. In the white haze, a golden ball floated and slowly rotated. Xianxia immediately came to a realization. Wasn't this the golden bead that the white fox gave him that day? When he felt the pain of his dantian being invaded, he couldn't help but be stunned. Was the image in his mind the scene in his dantian? He saw the golden bead rotating, driving the white vital energy in his dantian. After it was stirred into strands of white silk, it was absorbed by the golden bead. F***ck. Xianxia was shocked. The vital energy in his dantian was almost completely absorbed by the golden bead. His dantian, which had not been shaped for long, was slowly collapsing. If this was really the case, then all his previous efforts would have been in vain. He wanted to stop the golden bead, but he couldn't control it at all. Damn it! I worked hard for a whole year and now I'm back to square one. Xianxia hurriedly used the Mysterious Heaven method. A steady stream of spiritual energy was absorbed, turning it into vital energy and entering his dantian. Although the golden bead was small, it was like a bottomless pit, absorbing however much vital energy there was. Xianxia couldn't figure out what it was, so he decided to fight it with his life. If he didn't take advantage of the fact that his dantian was not shaped yet, then he wouldn't be able to have a high cultivation in this lifetime. The Mysterious Heaven method was used to the extreme, desperately absorbing the spiritual energy, and the golden bead was also doing the same. The man and the bead were stuck together. The third day passed. Xianxia didn't expect this useless disciple to have a bit of talent. He released his vital energy again and it was quickly absorbed by Xianxia. Knowing that his disciple was still blowing his dantian, he continued to guard him. The fourth day passed and the vital energy was still being absorbed. Xianxia was a little surprised. The fifth day passed and Xianxia was trembling with excitement. What did this mean? It meant that his useless disciple had the possibility of reaching the tribulation stage. Not to mention Ong Kwang-tsung, even in the cultivation world, how many people could have such talent? He didn't dare to meditate anymore. He guarded his disciple's door and looked around vigilantly. The sixth day passed and Xianxia's forehead was sweating. How could this be? The seventh day passed and Xianxia was a little worried. Did his disciple have any problems with his cultivation? The vital energy in his palm was just released tentatively, but in the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace and shot directly into his disciple's nose and mouth. Xianxia wiped the sweat off his forehead. How could a disciple who had just joined the sect absorb spiritual energy at such a speed? How could his dantian store it? Chapter 12. Naturally, Xianxia did not know what his master was thinking. He was trying his best to compete with the golden bead. After an unknown period of time, the golden bead, which had been spinning faster and faster, finally slowed down. It was now spinning at a uniform speed. Xianxia was overjoyed. He thought to himself that this guy was finally full. The true qi that was converted from spiritual energy immediately flowed into his dantian. Cry. When the dantian was 2/3 of its original size, it could no longer be blown up. Xianxia had already cursed 18 generations of White Fox's ancestors. Wouldn't giving him this thing be harmful? With the current situation, he was afraid that he would not even be able to reach the foundation building stage. His dream of flying on a sword would be cut off. Just as he was feeling annoyed, the golden bead that was spinning at a constant speed suddenly gave off a dazzling light. His dantian suddenly became hot. Xianxia could not bear the heat. The true qi that could not be squeezed in for a long time suddenly entered. The fixed dantian bulged again. Xianxia was stunned. The opportunity had come. He did not care so much. Enduring the heat, he raised the Mysterious Heaven skill to the limit and poured true qi continuously. After an unknown amount of time, when the dantian was 5 or 6 times bigger, The golden bead's light dimmed. It was as if it had woken up and was actually moving according to a fixed path. He could not pour true qi anymore. However, Xianxia was satisfied. According to the size of his dantian, it should not be a problem to cultivate to the tribulation stage, right? Thinking of this, he was secretly pleased. Now that his dantian was successful, he had entered the first level of qi training. He decided to use the mysterious heaven skill as a reference to the first level of qi training. As expected, the true qi flowed smoothly in the meridians. After a few cycles, Xianxia was greatly refreshed. He was overjoyed. Thinking of the second-level qi training route in his mind, he gritted his teeth and adjusted his true qi, rushing towards the unfamiliar meridians. The strong true qi rushed all the way with an unstoppable momentum. The pain from the widening of the meridians was unavoidable. Xianxia was both in pain and happiness. He gritted his teeth and forced the second-level route to open. His body shook and the true qi circulated a few times. The painful meridians instantly became warm and he felt like he was floating. Comfortable. True qi advance, the destination is the third-level route. Xianxia directed his Jin qi to charge forward again. The unstoppable qi flow surged forward, breaking through all obstacles and circulating in the sky. Bakialu. Target. Rank 4 line charge. Xianxia's thoughts were everywhere. His Jinqi was still strong, but the resistance was tenacious and the pain was immense. Halfway through, he had to adjust his breathing to slow down. He cursed in his heart, "The Japanese are not good enough. Change the line. The revolution has not succeeded yet. Comrade, you still need to work hard. For the great cause of cultivation, comrades. Let's charge." Xianxia pushed his innate qi to the limit, sweeping through everything in his way. The immense pain made his body tremble a little. He bit the tip of his tongue, held his strength and broke through the last obstacle in one go. In an instant his body felt as if he was soaking in a hot spring and his whole body felt comfortable. His Jinqi circulated again and again, and the feeling of his 8 extraordinary meridians being connected was truly wonderful. After enjoying it, he was pulled back to reality. Xianxia thought to himself, "Don't tell me that I have mastered the mysterious heaven skill just like that?" He had already reached level 4? I'll have to ask Master to be sure. His Jinqi slowly returned to his dantian, and he checked the huge space in his dantian. Suddenly he thought of a problem. If his dantian was so big, wouldn't his stomach become a big belly woman? A month had passed and his disciple still hadn't woken up. How could a normal person blow the dantian for a month? Xianxia stood in front of the bed with a heavy expression. He was sure that something had happened to his disciple. Just as he was considering whether or not to investigate, a scream was heard. Xianxia jumped up from the bed. He looked as if he had seen a ghost and his hands kept touching his abdomen. After a long time he patted his chest and said, Good, I didn't become a big belly woman. That scared me to death." Suddenly he saw an old face coming over and he was shocked again. When he saw who it was, he exhaled, "Master. It's you." Xianxia looked him up and down and said suspiciously, "You've been sitting for a month, are you okay?" "Hehe. I'm fine." Xianxia patted his chest and said with a smile, "Master. I succeeded." Then he was stunned. "I sat for a month? What do you think? I guarded your door for a whole month. How is that possible? Normal people only need 5 days to blow the dantian, but you sat for a whole month. You're not trying to fool people, are you?" Xianxia asked. Xianxia laughed. It should be because of the golden pearl in his dantian. He didn't know if he should tell his master or not, so he decided not to say it first. He shook his head. "I don't know what happened either." Xianxia didn't ask any more. He sighed, patted his disciple's shoulder and said, "You can be considered to have entered level 1 qi training. Since there's hope, you should work hard to cultivate. When you reach level 4 qi training, you can cultivate skills." Xianxia scratched his head in embarrassment and said, "Master, there's something I want to ask you. Please help me take a look." Xianxia nodded his head. He said this with a guilty conscience, but in his heart he already knew that it was because of the golden pearl. However, because of his past life and after listening to his master's words, he decided to keep the matter of the golden pearl to himself. It wasn't that he was afraid of what his master would do, but some things were always like this. There were some things that couldn't be said even to the people closest to him. It wasn't that he didn't believe it, but it was for the good of everyone. The forbidden area in the back mountain? How Xianxia muttered to himself. His disciple often went to the back mountain. Perhaps it really had something to do with that. He then shook his head and stopped thinking about it. A few days later, Yu Qianzhou was meditating on the couch when Hao Xianxia came in and threw a pile of things on the couch. The former stopped his cultivation and woke up. The latter smiled and said, "I'm going out for a month. There are some spirit stones here for you to cultivate and absorb. I copied that book for you. There are all the cultivation methods for the aura refining stage inside. There's also that sword, I found it. When you cultivate, find a remote place and don't let people see it. Although your cultivation is enough to carry a sword, the sect hasn't given it to you yet. It's not good to let people see it. Keep the matter of your cultivation a secret for as long as you can." Yu Qianzhou flipped through the book and asked doubtfully, "Master, where are you going?" Hao Xianxia smiled and said, Your cultivation speed is godly. This time I want to go to the new talent assembly, with sect leader Xixiang's help. Tomorrow I'll go with a few Xixiang. At that time, when we distribute the foundation building pills, I'll have the nerve to ask for 1 or 2 to prepare for your foundation building." Yu Qianzhou nodded. He bit his lips and didn't say anything. His eyes were a little red. How could he not know that this drunkard of a master was used to being lazy? Now that he took the initiative to ask to do something, it was for him. The next day his master left. Yu Qianzhou picked a time when there was no one around. He carried a bag of things and stood at the entrance of the forbidden area. He took a deep breath and walked in. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.